Oosh, 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 ooh, ooh, ooh. Early August, it must be R.C. Fisher season. SZN.
Awesome. So glad it is August and thankful and appreciative to be back on the show on our annual August journey. 7 hours of great content coming at you. That's just the first question.
We've done a 4-hour podcast before. I can't do a 4-hour podcast today. I've got some other appointments later in the afternoon, but we are going to go hard. We have an aggressive show sheet here. We are not going to back down. We are going to fade a bunch of players people like. This is what we like to do here, and we're going to talk about some players that we like that other people are just so done with and don't care about anymore and don't want to hear about. Remember, the best example ever was Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. We came on and were like, Ronald Jones, terrible. Like, he's not good. He's really, really bad. In fact, even with steroids, he stunk, right? Even steroids couldn't help him, okay? So that's how bad he is. I don't care if he was drafted in the second round. I don't care if he was drafted over a bunch of other running backs that are better than him. It doesn't matter anymore, right? Just because you think that he's going to be the starter in Tampa doesn't mean that that's actually how it's going to play out. And as it turned out, they had Leonard Fournette, and they're not going to play him over Leonard Fournette. The other thing, Leonard Fournette was a top 5 pick in the draft. Like, the draft capital argument was all anyone ever had with Ronald Jones because the game was never there. The pass catching was never there. The ball security was never there. The vision was never there. Nothing was there except he was drafted in the second round for some unknown reason. Meanwhile, Fournette was a top 5 pick. It's just we're so boggled and befuddled by the fickle fantasy gamer and who they like and why anyone ever got behind Ronald Jones, I don't know.
And then he lands on the place that sprinkles pixie dust on all players. He goes to Kansas City, and then we start it all up again. Andy Reid's going to make him something special.
Oh yeah, we got to take shots on Ronald Jones last year. Remember that? Yeah. So the only time I ever drafted Ronald Jones, I did draft a little bit of him last year. I did. We talked about it. We liked Pacheco. We liked
there was a little guy named Isiah Pacheco at the time that was just a glimmer in the eye at that point.
You at this time last year were pounding the table for Isiah Pacheco. I mean, you were the first one that was like, this guy's really, really good. And again, I don't care that he was a 7th round pick. Like, I've talked to people that feel this way about Dwayne McBride, right? Like, this guy's really good. The NFL just blew it, just like they blew it on Austin Eckler, right? They've blown it plenty, and they blew it on Ronald Jones. Like, it's okay. They can blow it. They blow it all the time, focusing on the wrong details. But I went back and watched him at Rutgers, and you were like, what am I missing here? This guy was the one thing they had to actually generate positive yards, and he was good at it. And someone in Kansas City saw that he was good at it, and he wasn't this prolific pass catcher. So whenever they're drafting a player primarily to be a runner, not a special teamer, and not a satellite back, that gets my attention. Because typically you can find these grinders, these Caleb Huntleys, in free agency as UDFAs after the draft. So if someone actually wants to invest an actual pick on a slasher grinder back, that means something. That means they think that there's a special quality there. Someone in Kansas City saw a special quality with Pacheco. Someone in Minnesota saw a special quality with Dwayne McBride this year.
And with Pacheco, not only does he have the running skills that got uncovered quickly in camp, that guy can catch the football.
Yeah.
He's the 3-down real deal.
What am I
Clyde
missing with Pacheco?
Edwards-Helaire
I mean,
is learning.
You've seen his ADP just start to it's one of those guys that just incrementally has been climbing. Now, he's really settled in around slot 75. Like, there was a time when you could get him around pick 100. McKinnon signs back with the team. Like, okay, we're back in this world where, depending on game script and in game situation, it's going to be one or the other. Not necessarily. Pacheco is a receiver. Now, in college, he wasn't. Right? In college, never had 20 catches. But this was because the offense he was operating in was horrific. Right? In only 9 games in 2020, he did have 20 catches and only 116 rush attempts. So if you actually look at that rate, his reception to rush attempt rate in 2020 was incredibly high.
And those 20 receptions were probably half the team's completed passes for the season.
That's right. In the context of
that was
Rutgers
a bad
offense,
Rutgers team
in a COVID year, right? This is why I like to look back at some of these players' statistical histories in context. Now that we have the COVID year behind us, we can discount 2020 and the additional transfers that were happening around college football at that time. And now there's new transfer rules with the transfer portal, making it easier for these guys to transfer. Going back and looking at Michael Wilson, going back and looking at Luke Musgrave, going back and looking at Isiah Pacheco. He's like, oh, okay. Maybe actually these guys were dominant when they were healthy and on the field and integrated into the offense. And that's the performances we should be focused on. I'm guessing you like Musgrave, and I'm guessing you like Michael Wilson.
I'll save that for the questions I know we have coming up. But on Pacheco, what's crazy is it just shows how much where you were drafted, what number, what round matters to the masses of fantasy players and the media and everybody else. When Clyde Edwards-Helaire got drafted and everybody thought, man, the guy who gets 15 carries a game and maybe 3 to 5 targets a game on the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, that's got to be the top guy in all of fantasy. Get out of here, Jonathan Taylor. We're going with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's the perfect spot. That's what you've got in Pacheco this year. He's going to be taking about 15 carries a game, give or take, depending on what's going on with the game script. But he's also going to get 3 to 5 targets because he can really catch the ball well, above average receiver. And they're treating him like a star by holding him out of practice right now. He doesn't have anything to prove. Jerick McKinnon is a nice piece to have, and he'll get his snaps. Deneric Prince is a nice story, but they're not gonna get in front of Pacheco. They're all in. You hear the players talk about him. You hear the coaches talk about him. They are all in. You got the number one back on arguably the number one offense in the NFL, and people are like,
pick 75,
25th best back, 27th best back.
Yeah, 7th round pick in fantasy, big deal, right? Now, that's 7th round in tight end premium at the FFPC, 6th and 7th round in best ball leagues like Underdog, but that's a format where you're drafting 2 quarterbacks.
Yep.
And sometimes 3 quarterbacks, sometimes 3 to 4 tight ends. So in a traditional seasonal league, which is what we're talking about in August, most leagues are not tight end premium. Most leagues are not best ball. And you want running backs and wide receivers predominantly in the early rounds in traditional seasonal leagues. Pacheco's got to be a 6th rounder, should be a 4th or 5th rounder. He doesn't have the historic production and usage to justify being a, top 40 pick yet, right? But he should be right after the top 40 picks go. He should be in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? He should be in the conversation. And we talked about it on the Sonic Truth show. Like, why would you draft Alexander Mattison over Isiah Pacheco? What do you think you're getting? Like, what more do you think you're getting? Pacheco is actually a better receiver, has a more secure role, and is just better in every phase, much more explosive and better, and in a better offense. It's very hard to find a better offense than Minnesota, but Kansas City is!
There is not one thing besides what the team is paying them that Madison is better at than Pacheco. Not one aspect of the game. Blocking, running, outside, inside, catching. It's not even close. They're not even the same tier or stratosphere.
People have Madison ahead of Pacheco in Dynasty, RC.
I love it.
Dynasty.
I'm thankful for it for as long as I can get it.
He's got at least 3 years on Kansas City. At least 3 years. Madison will at most be there 2 years.
3 weeks.
Right? But he could be gone after 3 weeks or a year. It's like this. So the job security is much better for Pacheco. Going around the league, these are the types of running backs you need to be targeting. The running backs that are heading into their second year that were drafted, and ideally not drafted in the first round, because then there might be all of this sort of hand wringing about the fifth year option and holding out and all those things. You get Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley. If it's Pacheco, he's going to be happy to be there. Look at Tony Pollard, right? Tony Pollard, it was the best possible investment to go up and trade for Tony Pollard, as I did, going into his second and third year with Dallas. But in particular, with Pacheco, he has the primary back role. And you have 3 years. The idea that you have 3 locked-in productive years on a top offense for any running back in Dynasty is a windfall, right? So many running backs in Dynasty have this foreboding, like, contract dilemma hanging over them. Or they're just totally unproven, right? Or you don't know what exactly they are yet because they're rookies, right? In this case, we actually know what Pacheco is, and we have 3 years locked in, right? We don't even look ahead at running backs any more than 2 years anymore because just the way the NFL has devalued the position. With a handful of these running backs that were drafted in 2022, we actually know what we're going to be getting for 3 years, which is a huge benefit.
And he comes from, as you mentioned, I don't think he's going to be one to put up a giant protest about getting more money. He sees what Kelsey and Mahomes are doing. They're taking less money to be a part of that team. I think they'll take care of them when the time is due. I don't think we'll get into anything ugly with Pacheco. He's just not that kind of guy. He was a multiple-year team captain, strong family background, tough upbringing, but he pulled himself up through it. I don't think you're going to see him acting out.
You got at least 2 more years for Gainwell in Philadelphia, but the best examples are a guy that I love and the guy that I've been trading for and the guy that I've been standing for. Rashod White is the other guy, right? Rashod White was not a top 50 pick. Rashod White, like Pacheco, is the clear primary back and has 3 years where we know he's going to be the primary back for an offense in the NFL, which is a great benefit to your dynasty team. Dameon Pierce, same thing. That's who Theo really likes. Theo likes Dameon Pierce for that reason. I'm not as excited about Dameon Pierce because I haven't seen the types of plays out of the backfield that I'd like to see as a receiver. Actually, with Pacheco, we had that one game, right? We had that one game, that one 6-target game in the playoffs. And so that was my big sort of awakening with Pacheco as a receiver. I haven't had that moment yet with Dameon Pierce, but bottom line is that's an offense with an underrated offensive line, and that is going to be improving over the next couple of years, and he's going to be there for the next 3 seasons.
And to go with the theme of looking back at the players last year that are, for whatever reason, when they're not a rookie anymore, the shine seems to come off of them for some reason, especially if they weren't number 1 or first round draft picks.
Yeah, oh my God, I don't even remember Kenneth Gainwell. I barely remember the playoffs where he was the preferred back over Miles Sanders that now everyone has rediscovered because he's going to be the primary back, and he actually has some contract security, unlike most of the running backs that sign these fake 2-year deals that are actually 1-year deals. Miles Sanders is a fake 3-year deal. It's actually a 2-year deal, and was a 2-year deal. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty secure. This is pretty good. But these other guys that were rookies last year, Tyler Algier, right, mothballed, right? A bunch of these other guys that it could happen, right? It could happen for Zamir White, right? But I mean, the second-year running backs that we know are primary backs is like 3 or 4 guys. That's it. And Pacheco happens to be one of them.
And Rachaad being one of them, and those two together, I would just put an exclamation point on this. It's not just that they're second-year guys that weren't first-round draft picks, and they seem to be in a pretty good spot right now, therefore we like them. I would argue, and argued last year, and feel even better about it this year, Rashod White was the best, most talented running back in the 2022 draft class. Better than Breece Hall, which if you're the best running back out of the 2022 class, it means you're also the best running back out of the 2023 class. He's better than Bijan Robinson all day long, and it means he was the best running back out of the prior draft, the 2021 class, which I think was at the Najee class. So
yeah, I call it the ETN class, but yes, Najee was also in that class.
The Rachaad is to me the most talented running back all around because he has everybody getting excited over Jahmyr Gibbs. Rachaad White is just as good or better a receiver. Plus, he ate Jahmyr Gibbs for lunch. He's 20 pounds thicker and heavier, and they're about the same speed. But White is taller, thicker, and has got the full backfield to himself, where Gibbs is going to be sharing with David Montgomery. Yet Gibbs is going like wildfire, and nobody cares about Rachaad White.
We'll talk more about Rachaad White in the show. We got to start the show because this is great pre-show. I mean, I love the pre-show, but you know that your talk with me about Rachaad White and Pacheco has really resonated. White even more than Pacheco, because with White, what he did last year, proving himself as a receiver, is something that I value the most, right? I value it more than being on the Chiefs. I value it so to usurp Leonard Fournette as a receiver, a guy that goes out and commands 100 targets in a season, to go ahead and usurp that guy as a rookie when you're just barely getting acclimated to the league. And to be able to accomplish that with Tom Brady, one of these veterans who defers to other veterans as his default operating procedure, it is wild and so impressive. And we have been on an island, you and me and our respective organizations, in putting Rachaad White up on this pedestal where you get feedback on social media, you get people sending you emails. How could you possibly have Rachaad White in your top 15 dynasty running backs? And my only response is, how could you not? How could you not? What are you saying? They're like, you have Rachaad White ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. And I'm like, all day. All day you have him ahead of Dameon Pierce. Of course we do. What are you talking about? Make up your mind, by the way. You want to be chasing draft capital all day. By the way, the NFL did prefer Rachaad White to Dameon Pierce in the NFL draft. So make up your mind what you're going to care about.
Yeah,
You care about receiving? You care about PPR? I mean, what? You care about touches? What? What do you care? You care about athleticism? Like, I give you the complete package. And it's like, I don't think so. I'm not excited enough. I don't know
Look
why
at his yards per carry.
His yards per carry. His yards per carry. Last yards per carry were so low.
I think Pacheco's Rutgers offensive line was better than what Rachaad White was running behind in Tampa Bay last year.
Oh, yeah, Pacheco. Pacheco's yards per carry in college was not impressive. 4.1. That was 6th percentile.
The Rachaad low yards per carry, you're talking about probably the worst offensive line in the league because they got mass injured really before the season even began. That's why Brady was throwing for his life. So
Wasn't that
White
every week
that.
in preseason? It was every week in preseason. Everyone's like, oh, they lost another guard? Oh, my, who are they down to? Everyone was asking, oh, poor Brady. Oh, Brady must be on the phone, calling all of his guard friends, right? Trying to do something to rebuild this offensive line. And it was like, no, they're just dead this year. Actually, Brady had a year just like this, just like 2022 with New England. They had a year where they lost, I believe, early in the playoffs to the Ravens because they had everyone on their offensive line hurt. Nate Solder, on down the list, it was all torn ACLs and torn pecs and shoulders. I just remember the Patriots had a year where almost everyone on the offensive line by the time the playoffs rolled around was out. And Brady didn't have any time to throw. They couldn't do anything. But they did make the playoffs because they're the Patriots and it's Brady. But I was like, any given year, you can have a complete devastating apocalypse happen to your offensive line. The offensive line apocalypse happens to one or two teams per year will have this, where it's just complete evisceration and your offense ceases to function. If you watch the Buccaneers last year, their offense ceased to function. The entire thing crumbled.
And they were mocked by the entire football community for how bad their running game was, to the point that they finally decided to give, in a shocking turn of events, in a game in Germany at 9 o'clock in the morning, I see Rachaad White starting, and everybody's like, what? Where? Rich Eisen is like, what? Then he goes out for the team that was getting mocked for its running game. Rachaad White goes out and runs for 100 yards plus, I believe, in his first true start with that horrific offensive line.
The yards per carry. Yeah, and even like, the yards created. Okay, if you can't get to the line of scrimmage, you can't create a yard. Okay, so even some of these more advanced metrics, you can have bad luck. So it's something I've been talking about the last couple of weeks is a lucky season does not just mean you were fortunate in the counting stats column. A lucky season also means many of your advanced stats also popped, and in some cases undeserved. You can have undeserved quality advanced metrics in a small sample in a lucky, highly fortunate season, which is something that even now, after 10 years, I'm just appreciating. Like how we'll talk about with some of these receivers last year. There's some of these receivers were really unlucky, right? Some of these rookie receivers last year that are now sophomores, and some of them were super lucky, right? The best example of this was Chase Claypool a few years ago, his rookie year. And we talked about it at length. It was like, he's not Calvin Johnson. He got lucky. And if you're chasing that, and it's the perfect storm, right? If you're 6'4", 230, running a sub 4.4, and then you go out and score 15 touchdowns as a rookie, you are necessarily going to melt brains.
I built my company to find Chase Claypool. And now after several of the most recent years that the game is changing, I've come to learn that I was looking for Amon-Ra St. Brown all along.
Bingo. Bingo. Oh, my God. Bingo. This is what you and I talking every August is not a coincidence. Why do I always want to make sure you're on the show? I don't have everybody back, right, every year, but this is a like-minded, meeting of the minds, right, where we have a similar story, similar career path, and a similar perspective, and hearing about your journey and how you've gotten from point A to point B with your company, with your player evaluation, is something that it just delights me to listen to, because I'm like, wow, there's a handful of people in this world that could truly identify with some of the things that I go through or that I've been through, and you're one of them. And the fact that we can actually do a podcast and we can have this conversation publicly and everyone can learn from it or be entertained by it is cool.
And the fact that the two of us are here after 10 plus years, built on the, probably on the back of a cocktail napkin in the early days, to think that we're here now with all the big boys trying to push us out, suppress us on Google, and, won't let us play in their sandboxes everywhere else, that we're still here independently, and they're still making the same mistakes after 10 years, and we're evolving and getting stronger. It's a testimony to the great organization you have built, and I'm so thankful for all the people that have helped me get to where we're at.
Yeah, it's some of these tweets that I get, some of these emails that I get, where it's clear, right? Patreon.com/Podfather. People just say, hey, we're going to support your media operation. And yeah, we'll send them a t-shirt. They get access to our Backstage Pass show and our patron posts, fab guidance, and all those things weekly. But those are the things that really drive you, because you're like, okay, this isn't a drive-by person that just found your website on Google because they were trying to look up 40 times. This is someone who actually has an appreciation for the full spectrum of what you're doing, the media, the information, everything, and these people also recognize the positive evolution, the points where, oh wow, 3 years ago you would have been pushing in this direction. Now you're pushing in that direction. There's clearly been a learning, and I've been here for the ride. I've been here watching this organization, this organism really grow, evolve, change, and improve. Like watching evolution happen in real time is a cool experience. And I've had emails, podfather@rotounderworld.com, people have written me something to that extent many times. And that's how okay, all right, we're going to have a subscriber and a supporter for as long as we're doing this in these people, and they're the ones that are going to make sure that we stay in business.
I hope we're the voice for the alternative scouting community, and I think we have been, and I'm thankful that the NFL doesn't change. It only seems to get worse. If it was getting better, Isiah Pacheco would have been a 4th-round flyer, not a 7th-round flyer.
Right.
So thank goodness.
And we have our coaching tree too, right? We have our the Cody Carpentiers of the world, and we're always bringing on new people, and they're taking what we've already done and then coming up with our own spin on things, and then we incorporate those learnings. There's a lot of things that Cody Carpentier brought to the table that now Maddie Kiwoom and others here are incorporating. So I'll bring you in. We'll start the show. This was great outtakes content for the podcast and great pre-show for YouTube. People just they love the show. They love the show, RC, and they love it especially when you're on. So here we go.
All right.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. Oh, a long-term friend of the underworld and one of the true OGs in the football metrics community. Here with me today, it is R.C. Fischer. Talk to me.
Thank you for having me back for another August extravaganza 10-hour podcast coming at you. Or maybe just 2.
I'm seeing stars. I'm literally seeing stars right now because of the oxygen and was deprived in my brain for a moment while I was just exhaling to announce you joining me on the program in with as much enthusiasm as I could possibly muster. And I have a lot of enthusiasm for a bunch of these rookie receivers. And I have a lot of enthusiasm for the sophomore receivers. So I think today we typically talk a lot about running backs. And I wanted to change it up this year and talk a little bit more about receivers and young receivers than the young running backs. Because last year you gave the people Isiah Pacheco. You gave the people Rashod White. And if you can go back in your podcast feed to R.C. Fischer joining me last year at this time, you'll hear him announcing to the world that Isiah Pacheco is the real deal, that Rashod White is elite. And those words have echoed in our analysis and our rankings on Player Profiler for the last year. And we are very, very, very comfortable and have been very comfortable where we have Pacheco and White ranked. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later in the show, but that's just one example of RC being an ace in the hole. Looking at these receivers, I do like a bunch of wide receivers that were drafted in the first round this year. In fact, I don't believe that I like as many receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds ever, right? When I think about the number, the sheer volume of receivers that were drafted this year that I really like in the top 50, there's at least 6 guys. And typically, there's 3 or 4 I really like, but there's all it's polarizing. Never before have I either loved you or wanted nothing to do with you as a wide receiver. There's a bunch of receivers where I'm like, I can see it. I can see it. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Right? George Pickens, I don't know what to make of this guy. He's interesting. Skyy Moore, I like him a lot, but I'm not I'm not over the moon for this guy. We're going to see how it goes. Very interesting player. I'm not going to give up on Skyy Moore. We'll talk about him later. I've been warming from the beginning, from the moment George Pickens was drafted by the Steelers. I've been just consistently warming to him as opposed to, being on this roller coaster of loving him and then fading him and then loving him again. The one roller coaster ride I've been on has been Treylon Burks. Right, so we'll get into the sophomore receivers later. We're going to go through a whole bunch of different dichotomies. Would you rather have Burks or Pickens, for example? We'll talk about that later. But let's zero in on this rookie class because, again, I think it's a fantastic rookie class. And 5 years ago, I would not have. 5 years ago, I would have been grossed out. This year, I like it. The 2023 version of the Podfather likes this. So 2 questions. Number 1, how do you assess the 2023 wide receiver class compared to the last 5 years of rookie wide receivers? And can you give us your top 5 of the rookie wide receivers? Because I have a feeling you're going to leave a receiver out that most people have in their top 5. So I really want to hear from you.
All right. It's a deep group of talent, whether we're talking A, B, or C. There's just the talent coming from college football, the talent coming from high school and 7-on-7 camps from grade school and all that. We are just getting a surge. We're getting inflation. We're getting Federal Reserve inflation of college football wide receivers spit into the NFL. And wait, if you think this year is good, wait till you see next year's crop. And then we'll probably say the same thing about 2025. I went through some of the top 10 2024 guys, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. They're going to blow this current group away.
Okay, let's look ahead for a moment. Let's look ahead. No, I want to stay here for a second. 2024 wide receivers. We know Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 1. Who's number 2?
I don't know if Marvin Harrison's number 1 for me. Let's just drop some bombs right now.
Who's number 1 then?
I think, and I need to see more. When I do the look ahead for Devy, it's abbreviated. That kid from LSU, Neighbors, he is really a good looking specimen. Now I like Marvin Harrison too, but Neighbors and Worthy, I'm like, oh my goodness, the other guy, the other Ohio State wide receiver, it's like, man, these are. I've never seen so many guys I put a preview grade of A on, in the early stages.
Good fences make good neighbors.
That will not be the name of the show.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Edit that one out.
All right. So neighbors. I love. Okay. So we got neighbors. Neighbors is it. I love where your head's at. And with this group, like I said, just incredible route running, hands, precision, early college dominance with these advanced metrics. And, you look back and you're like, oh, I know Kenny Pickett's going to have a good year, but, man, he wouldn't even be here right now if it wasn't for that season with Jordan Addison. Right, Jordan Addison helped make him. Right, and if Kenny Pickett goes on to be this superstar in the league and command one of these $300 million contracts, I hope that Jordan Addison gets some sort of care package from him, because he wouldn't have been a first-round pick without Jordan Addison and what they did together at Pitt. But talk to us about your top 5 rookie wide receivers.
I'm going to give the top 4 in that they're a group that is close together. I wouldn't argue with anybody liking the 1 as the 1 or the 4 as the 1. Whether you should take, what order you take them in for Dynasty or Fantasy is a totally different topic. I'm just going to go with who I think are the best looking receivers that I've scouted tape-wise, statistically, analytics. I think Michael Wilson's the best wide receiver in this class.
You can get him in the 4th round of rookie drafts. Yeah. The 4th round. He's phenomenal.
And then the next guy I would name is even more of a bargain. I think A.T. Perry is the second best wide receiver in this class. I think if there's a guy that we look back in a couple years and go, man, he was the guy that was just like Justin Jefferson that was sitting there all along, is A.T. Perry.
A.T. Perry is available in a bunch of my Dynasty leagues right now.
I don't know when he'll ever get of course I would have said that with Pacheco too. I would have said this guy's great, but these type of guys really don't get a chance. But then all of a sudden Pacheco did. So I put A.T. Perry there knowing that he's a bargain basement value, but I put him number 2 legitimately. He's my number 2 graded on pure talent standpoint. The situation in New Orleans is crowded as can be, but
for now, there's just no guarantee that Michael Thomas even plays another snap in the league.
And he's listed behind Michael Thomas, so I'm just waiting for the Michael Thomas fall down. The 3 and 4 interchangeable Zay Flowers and Jackson Smith-Njigba would be my other kind of the cluster of four that I think are a step above the rest of the group talent-wise. Zay Flowers just keeps getting my attention more. I loved him from the beginning. I have a hard time really in getting around his size and where he should be ranked in this class and how it's going to go with Baltimore. But just on a pure talent standpoint, I'm starting to think he might be Amon-Ra St. Brown with athleticism.
Yeah. He is an incredibly intense player, and he fits the mold of the current NFL archetype that is maximizing success. He's a little bit on the smaller side, right? You'd like him to be 6 foot, 190, right? That would be better. But 5'11", 180 is okay. That's just fine. That is just fine. But Michael Wilson, by the way, 6'1", 215. So
he's a man.
Yeah, and Michael Wilson had his best year as a freshman, the only year where he played more than 6 games. 84 targets as a freshman with special teams activity at Stanford. You have to love that. You absolutely have to love that about Michael Wilson. That's my go-to sort of statistical evaluation of Michael Wilson is when he was on the field, he was doing great. Right? He only played 6 games. Very similar to Luke Musgrave in that they were 2 of the best players at the Senior Bowl and barely played in their final year, but in the games they did play, completely dominant. 40 targets for Michael Wilson in 6 games in his final year at Stanford, right? Musgrave averaging huge share of the offense in the few games that he played at Oregon State. And so, and the catch rate for Michael Wilson was always 65% or above. And it was disorienting to see him be the best in these footwork drills where you're going up, it's in comparison to Jayden Reed and Tank Dell and all these super hyper quick receivers. To see one of the biggest receivers be the best was weird and great, delightful.
He could be the next Devontae Adams sitting right in front of our faces.
He's just right there. So you think for seasonal leagues he's worth drafting? It's tough.
I mean, at a certain point, a late flyer, I'd have to see him for sure get named a starter to begin with. I think he's going to be, but
best ball leagues, like 18, 20 round best ball leagues, you want him, right?
I would want him because I think he'll get into that starting rotation pretty quickly. And if Arizona's going to get whacked in a lot of their games, and if it's Tune or Kyler getting unleashed and just throwing a lot of garbage in the second half of games, then there's no reason to not get Michael Wilson in there. And Michael Wilson's the kind of worker. He's got all the, intangibles that we're now looking for when we say the Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of guy. That's Michael Wilson as well. So I think he's going to start. And then I'm going to get interested when they definitely say he's starting. I'm a little concerned that they're going to hold him back and do the rookie thing for a little bit, but before long, he's going to be starting, and before long, he could be their best wide receiver.
A.T. Perry started slowly in camp, though, right? They started him on the PUP, and I haven't seen any camp hype about him. Has there been camp hype that I missed?
There's been some positives thrown his way, especially before the like mini camp and OTAs, but I haven't seen anything radical since training camp started, and I know he's missed a little bit of time.
He might be a year away.
Yeah, he's not somebody I would draft. The Saints are loaded potentially across the starting front at receiver and tight end. So
you can't put a 6th round pick ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba, though. Legitimately, you can't do that.
For fantasy, no. If we're talking dynasty or the first pick I'd make was Smith-Njigba.
I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba outproduced Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson in 2021.
Whether I wanted to keep him or whether I wanted to go ahead and leverage and trade him hot to get my hands on if I needed to a Rachaad White or Pacheco, I would use him for my bidding one way or the other. He's the number one asset wide receiver for fantasy, but talent wise, like if we're in an NFL draft startup, I would take Michael Wilson.
Right. Okay. Good. But I mean, A.T. Perry's about to be 24 years old. Like, there's some issues with A.T. Perry. You understand?
Yes.
Okay. So,
but he's a talent. Whether he's ever will get that shot or whether it'll be 2 years from now, he's a talent.
You have him in your top 5 ahead of Jordan Addison?
Yeah, I don't like Jordan Addison. I don't love him. I'm not sure I even like him. He's fine. But I'll take of that class, I'll take Marvin Mims, I'll take Zay Flowers, I'll take Downs, I'll take just from a talent standpoint.
Oh, well, listen, man. Like, you don't have to tell me about Zay Flowers, right? I mean, Zay Flowers had a 45% dominator rating at Boston College. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Boston College, Maryland. If you're playing in the ACC or the Conference USA, you're playing against quality opponents, right? If you're at Cincinnati, some of these teams, like, that's not North Dakota State, right? That's not Southern Utah, right? These are real, actual Division I conferences. They're not major programs necessarily, but they're Division I conference schools. To go ahead and put up a Stephon Diggs 50% dominator rating at Maryland, right? That matters, right? If you're that dominant at BC, that matters. And then to just be so locked in throughout the process, as Zay Flowers has been, and then just to have the glowing training camp reports. Now, I know the teams are predisposed to want to look for reasons to post news items about rookies people have heard of, right? Whoever is covering the Saints, first of all, there aren't that many outlets covering the Saints. New Orleans, Cincinnati, there just are not a lot of newspapers left, if any, in these communities. And there just aren't a lot of beat reporters. Like the Athletics laying off a bunch of people right now.
Yep.
So the Athletic was the one place we had. We're like, okay, we know we're going to get coverage of all 32 NFL teams from the Athletic. Now that's in question, right? So we know the Jets and the Giants and the Eagles are going to get coverage. Saints, and then now we're talking about A.T. Perry, a 6th-round pick. So we're going to be waiting a while. Even if he is shining in camp, we're not going to hear about it unless he was a first-round pick. Then the reporter's incentivized to put that out there as a headline. Then the team is incentivized to make sure that they're putting videos of that player's beautiful catches, highlight catches, on the internet, on Twitter. 6th-round pick, they're less likely to do that. So there's a selection bias there against an A.T. Perry and in favor of a guy like Quentin Johnston. That we can all keep in mind, which is if you're looking for camp hype to get excited about some of these players, well, you're going to be waiting a while.
He does look good in flag football play.
Yeah, so the bottom line is Zay Flowers is going to be a thing. Right, and it could happen quickly, just like it could happen more quickly for even A.T. Perry than we might think at first glance, because there's no guarantee Michael Thomas is anything other than just a dust cloud. Like, Odell Beckham is not someone I'm drafting because Odell Beckham can't hurt me in fantasy leagues. Odell Beckham is going to max out as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. We're hoping maybe somehow he can reach wide receiver 30, but what's the probability that a guy like Odell Beckham, given his age and his injury track record and rehabilitation, is going to be anything other than a possession receiver who probably doesn't even make it through the season. Ultimately, retires in like week 15, week 16, because he's given everything he can. He was a contributor the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and then just was eased out of the starting lineup and shuffled off, right? That's most likely what's going to happen with Odell Beckham, whereas with Bateman and with Zay Flowers, they can hurt you if you don't draft enough of them.
And the opposing defenses, just like the NFL draft scouting is still wrong to this day, defensive coordinators are mostly just as clueless. They will focus in on the story player. So the people or the teams that play Baltimore, their defensive coordinators for the week are going to know they're going to be, we've got to stop. We've got to watch Odell Beckham. We're going to put our top guy on Odell Beckham. So I think he's got all of the problems of multiple ACLs and age and being overrated at this stage of his career. Plus, he's probably going to get the top coverage.
Right. So it all points to Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman being a value. Do you believe that Rashod Bateman is going to be able to actually have a career resurgence this year?
I don't think it's going to be this year. I think it's going to be frustration because of his foot, and we're going to be having to wait till another year or some chunk into the season.
But that's fine. You believe in him as a talent.
Oh, yeah, Rashod Bateman is a talent. I am worried about the foot, and I think the Ravens are showing you by their draft and who they're signing and everybody they've been chasing that they're worried about it too.
Yeah, we can't say that Michael Thomas is dust primarily because of a foot injury and then say, oh, yeah, Rashod Bateman's going to be fine. Yeah, but it is true that players have come back from devastating foot injuries and hit peak performance. And players are not healthy until they are, right? They're not fully healthy. They're off to the side. And then one day they're active and they're awesome. And that's, I think, what's going to happen with his foot injury. He may start the year on the PUP, but
I think
the moment he's active, he's gonna be 100%, and he's gonna be tearing it up. At some point this season, I believe Rashod Bateman will tear it up, but not someone I'm aggressively drafting in seasonal leagues because there's like you said, a high probability that he's going to end up getting churned on the waiver wire at the beginning of the season by whoever drafted him in your league, and then you can pick him up.
And they're installing this new offense with the new offensive coordinator, and he's missing all of that time that Aguilar, Odell, and Likely and Flowers are getting. So it's going to put him further behind. Even when he gets to where he's 100%, he's going to be slowly brought back in, not always because of the foot, but because he's still learning the offense.
So this is the classic example of an ambiguous wide receiver core that you need to be invested in, and the primary receiver that you need to be focused on is Flowers, because Flowers is going to have a role early competing with Odell Beckham Jr., right, and Nelson Aguilar. So it's going to be this dynamic talent across from like just dust clouds. Then it's going to be him with Bateman, right? But the thing is, with rookies, you typically see the rookie receivers hit their stride in the second half of the season.
Yep.
So he's going to be propped up early with just additional opportunity with Bateman not 100% up to speed, right? So he'll get some opportunity bonus from that situation. Then he's going to get opportunity bonus later in the year as I believe Odell Beckham will likely fade, and he gets more comfortable with the offense itself, with Lamar Jackson, and going up against opposing cornerbacks in the NFL. So every week there's going to be some external force propelling Zay Flowers forward, which is the reason why of all these Ravens receivers, he's my focus.
Yep.
He could easily be the number one rookie wide receiver in fantasy points this year. Easily.
No doubt.
Why don't you like Jordan Addison, though? Because this is freaking me out, man.
I'll give you two things that concern me on Addison. One is watching his tape, watching him in the Pac-12 when he faced Utah and Clark Phillips was on him, facing I think Christian Gonzalez. The Pac-12 had some really good corners, so it was, you had good tape to watch on and I thought Addison would get gobbled up by all of the top corners. I was surprised by what I saw and jarred a little bit. So between that and I get a vibe when if I put Addison into a bucket with all of these other guys, with Mims and Jayden Reed and Flowers and all that, we'll just call that like the smaller, speedy receivers. Addison comes off with a bit of an attitude, and I'm worried that he's gonna fall into that not Amon-Ra St. Brown thing that we want out of our wide receivers. That it's not like Addison is so good, so much faster and more three-cone agile and everything else than a lot of these other guys like Reed and Flowers and all of them, that if I'm having to delineate and pick between them, I'm seeing some work ethic things and some issues with him against top corners in the Pac-12 that I'm like, it's enough to, I'll pass. If I'm wrong, great. You can profit off of them. Other people in my league, I'm just going to take a pass.
It is a
for
concern.
the price. For the price,
it is a concern because he's already been arrested, or he's not been arrested. Excuse me. He's already been pulled over and cited. He's already been cited. No, he was not arrested. He was cited. He was cited for speeding. At least 60 miles an hour over the limit. I think it was closer to like 75 miles an hour over the limit. Like 140 and a 65, something like that, at least. I'm sure the chat will correct me exactly where he was cited. But we have attitude, right? So he's showing a truculent attitude and already had intersections with law enforcement off the field as a rookie. That's not a good combination, right? I believe that he was so impressive as an early declare, a guy with a 1,600-yard season in college, every year posting a 70% catch rate, special teams activity, that he has great instincts. And there is a narrative that he was playing hurt last year, and that was why he didn't perform as well against top corners. His production was way down. His target share was way down, right? He also was competing against better receivers for targets, and that NFL scouts did not seem to blink at him having this huge dip in production last year. So those are some of the reasons why I'm still cool with him, right? But is he Jackson Smith and Jigba? Hell no. Hell no. But now if I put it to you and say it's Jordan Addison versus a Quentin Johnston.
Oh.
What are we talking about?
Well, I mean, Quentin Johnston is a no-go for me, so you can
you have a guy with some concerns that you just rather just every time in every draft, your league mates in rookie drafts are going to give you Zay Flowers, you're taking Zay Flowers. Yeah. You're just like, I'm a Flowers guy over Addison, and that's cool. Again, they have similar profiles. One guy just happens to be in a pass-first offense. The other guy happens to be in a run-first offense, and that's been the big differentiator so far between Addison and Flowers. But what we're also seeing is this additional concern that the way that Addison is wired is not the straightforward killer that Zay Flowers is wired, and there's a little knucklehead factor that you don't get with Flowers, and that's enough to chase you off Addison, and I totally understand that, and I'm all on board with you going Flowers over Addison. They're very close.
Let me put a situation to you. Not worried about draft capital and, Addison's trade value or anything else, if you were going to be stuck with these guys for the next 7 years, let's say, and if you knew all three of them were going to be starters, Marvin Mims, Jayden Reed, Jordan Addison, are you so sure of Addison so far above those guys, or do they kind of blend into a cluster of they're all good, I like a certain one of them, I'd be happy with any of them? And I think if it's like they're all good, they all got their ups, they all got their good points, I'm just going to remove Addison from the equation if there's a big pool of Addison alikes for me.
I don't think that they're equivalent. Okay, I think that Mims and Reed is a conversation for sure. But we're talking about a guy that had 90 targets as a true freshman in only 10 games in the COVID year. Okay, so if we're playing this game with Michael Wilson, we got to play the game with Jordan Addison. Okay, and give him the benefit of the doubt. The 21% target share as a freshman. Age 18, this guy was a phenom with Kenny Pickett. And then he was the best receiver in college football, arguably with a 100-catch season in 2021. So he's on another tier. Now, I understand the knucklehead factor is not good, right? But we've also seen plenty of wide receivers be divas and get pulled over for speeding or throwing rocks at police cars and still end up having 1,000-yard seasons and helping your fantasy team and going on and commanding huge contracts, huge second contracts. Christian Kirk, great example, right? So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, my God. What a cliche. I can't believe I did. Did I say that? Oh, my God. Oh,
cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert!
That came out of my mouth. That is so shameful and embarrassing. Oh, my God. Yeah, so anyway, I'm not going to allow some knucklehead tendencies to fully chase me off a receiver and materially change his ranking. It's one thing to put Flowers over him. They're both fantastic. They're both first-round picks. And I also agree with you that you need to look at these guys with a time horizon that's 3, 4, 5 years. You're going to be drafting a guy at age 21. Well, that's all the more reason to not just draft a player based on his year one situation. Yes, Addison's situation with Kirk Cousins, with a clear shot at the number 2 job, number 2 wide receiver position in Minnesota, is an excellent situation to be in. But that's not the reason to draft anyone in fantasy. Drafting a player because you love their year one situation is the path to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And you never want to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So if you think that Flowers is, like I said, materially better than Addison, you need to go Flowers, even though this guy's going to a run-first offense with a mobile quarterback as opposed to a pass-first offense with a pocket passer. That's an ideal situation. You can still go ahead and draft Addison at the FFPC for this year. Fine. But in Dynasty, where we have these guys for their careers, how they're wired matters more in that longer time horizon. So go Flowers. I'm on board with that 100%. But I'm not on board with dipping into the second round of wide receivers and receivers that were either seniors or weren't nearly as productive early in their career as Jordan Addison, and selecting them over Addison. I think that's a mistake. There's plenty of opportunities, because I do enough rookie drafts, thankfully. There's plenty of opportunities for me to gobble up all the Flowers I want because I am not drafting Quentin Johnston, so it makes it easy, right, to get a ton of Flowers in that situation. And then it's also very easy for me in the second round just to pound on Mims and Reed, knowing there's so many people out there that are going with the guy that was drafted early and has the size in Jonathan Mingo, right? So there's plenty of opportunity to capitalize on our love for Mims and our love for Reed, and I'm already loving what I'm hearing here. I'm loving what I'm hearing, that you're a big fan of Reed and Mims to the so much so that you're considering them over Addison. That's huge praise for them.
Yeah, and I wouldn't draft them in the first. I wouldn't burn my first round capital on them, but on my board, let's say, I have them all in the same cluster. So why would I use my first round pick on Addison if I'm just not that in love with them? I'd rather trade that pick or draft Addison and trade him to get something else that I want. So I'm not anti Addison. I just don't. He's not my favorite of that group.
I mean, even Marvin Mims, though, at age 18, he was also equally active on special teams. He actually had more touchdowns than Addison as a freshman and similar receiving yards. Just didn't have quite the same volume that Addison did, and certainly didn't have the sophomore season. Doesn't have a video game college season on his resume, right? Though you could argue 78% catch rate is pretty video gamey, right, in his second year at Oklahoma. So how he goes after a Jonathan Mingo is just so befuddling. It happened in the actual draft, right? The actual NFL team called the Carolina Panthers did this, which was just insane, but they did it, right? And then and then fantasy gamers predominantly are doing this. Where Jayden Reed goes in rookie drafts, I've seen Jayden Reed in Superflex leak into the early third round.
And I get some of these guys that we're talking about now fading off a little bit because people are connecting their current quarterback to them. But to your point, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I get, Jayden Reed plus Jordan Love, that's not going to be so great off the bat. And who knows what Mims is going to be with Russell Wilson, what's going on in Denver, where Addison's in a perfect situation. So I get some of the leakage, but I don't get Mingo. I mean, Mingo's fine, but I'm not, because everybody's high on Bryce Young. I am not. Mingo gets a free ride off of Bryce Young.
You don't think that Bryce Young is a robo quarterback that's just going to be hyper accurate and just throw lasers with every single pass and be one of the best rookie quarterbacks ever? Because that's what I've heard.
I'm sure he'll throw dump passes with the best of them, but you got a guy whose college output was equal to or worse than Tua and Mac Jones. Tua's not going to get a new contract from Miami, and Mac Jones is going to get supplanted by Bailey Zappi. But Bryce Young is the number one pick in the draft with Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud sitting there.
C.J. Stroud's phenomenal.
He's incredible.
Incredible. The fact that he didn't go with the 101,
I couldn't believe it.
Well, it was mystifying to me because I was they're going, okay, I know that like college football fans love Bryce Young, right? Because this was a year ago. I'm thinking, okay, I get it's 1-2 Young and Stroud, but by the time the process plays out and all the NFL scouts that value size and athleticism weigh in, that of course it's going to be Stroud, and then we'll see where Young ends up going. Maybe there's a guy that like a Richardson that rises up throughout the process, a Levis or a Richard, someone, and ends up being the second. And then maybe I was thinking Bryce Young could be like the third quarterback drafted. But the fact that he was able to pull off at 5'10", 5'11", maybe, that he was able to pull off first overall after the Baker Mayfield experience, right? Post Baker Mayfield, I was shocked. I was like, this is, and exactly what you're saying. Like, he's a machine quarterback, and not that he is a machine, meaning he's from a machine. He's from the Alabama machine. The Alabama machine, for some reason, manufactures a Tua, manufactures a Mac Jones, and doesn't value Jalen Hurts. So why is that a machine that you really want it to be your source of quarterback talent? I would much rather go with C.J. Stroud, and it was a great gift for the Texans.
Yeah, I was stunned. I love the scouting analysis that Stetson Bennett was too small, but Bryce Young, size doesn't matter.
No, yeah, it doesn't. If you're listen, if you have that Alabama helmet, size, but it's so quick to judge Mac Jones and just discard Mac Jones. Like Mac Jones doesn't even get drafted now in super. I mean, he does get, but he barely gets drafted in superflex leagues. And then the overvaluing of the situation, to me, the two sort of poster children for rookie wide receivers getting overdrafted based on situation. Number one, Quentin Johnston. Oh my God. Don't worry, even if he's bad or has no versatility and is the worst hands, it's Justin Herbert, so he's going to be fine. That's never been a thing. Never in the history of the world has a quarterback just carried a rookie receiver because, how many receiving yards did Skyy Moore have last year? Just because. Right? How many receiving yards did Khalil Shakir have last year with Josh Allen just because? What are we talking about? What? Right? And so Rashee Rice was a nice senior, right? But there's no explanation to why it took him so long. There's a reasonable explanation for why it took Jayden Reed this long. There's a reasonable explanation for why Michael Wilson peaked as a freshman. Right? These are explained. It's not able to be explained how at age 23 or age 22, Rashee Rice commands less than 80 targets in 12 games at SMU. What? It took him till his final year to actually post an impressive target share, and in that year, he didn't do anything on special teams. He's done nothing on special teams, did not come out early. To have both of those strikes against you, to come out late and not be a special teamer or show versatility or do much as a freshman at all at a smaller school, right? I mean...
And the tape didn't look good, and he wasn't as good as Danny Gray, and look where Danny Gray is at now, working on the same team. If he never meets up with Patrick Mahomes, however they met up in the spring or winter or whenever the heck they met up. If Patrick Mahomes didn't put in a good word for him, he might have gone in the 6th or 7th round or gone undrafted.
But that's not enough. See, you actually have to make plays in practice to get the attention of the coaches to move up the depth chart. So just because the player likes you, that's not enough, man. That's not gonna do it. You have a good quarterback, great. That doesn't mean anything. You have to really be good. That's the starting point. So,
and to your point about the coverage of the Saints, that there hardly is any left. You got everybody covering the Chiefs. So every time somebody on the Chiefs catches a pass in one-on-one drills against the corner, they're the next great star. Justin Ross is going to be a star. Deneric Prince is going to be a star.
Remember
Richard
Justin
James
Ross?
is going to be a star. Jody Fortson is going to be a
Justin Ross
star.
showed up in minicamp, and Justin Ross was somebody.
And he caught a pass. I can't believe it.
I can't believe it. I got to stash him in Dynasty. What? Right. So okay. So we're in lockstep here. I love this, with the exception of Jordan Addison. I just want to know finally what happened, like with Quentin Johnston. How the hell does that guy go in the first round? What?
What the Chargers did I think it partly was the people conducting the draft or off their rocker or fell in love with all the TCU tape and took all the TCU guys. I have no answer for it. I can't believe he went in the first round.
I can't believe. What was your assessment of him?
That I think it was similar to yours. It's like skinny guy goes deep, catches balls against his body, and then defenders magically slip and fall like they're on an ice skating rink, and he gets long touchdowns with nobody in camera shot, and I'm supposed to think he's the greatest? I don't think so.
I've never seen this many defenders slip and fall. And it all added up. All these design bubble screens and all these slants and all these defenders falling down led to a grand total of 7 targets a game.
And I mean, he's a tall guy and a speedy enough deep ball guy in college. So, I mean, he's going to be college good. I just didn't see anything pro-wise that I was like, oh, this is a franchise wide receiver. I saw somebody.
What I saw. I was like, wow, this is a quintessential. See, that's good. That's no baby in bathwater. That was good. College star. This is it. This is a guy who can bully small college defenders. He runs your 4-5 just well enough. He can catch the ball and pin it against his body just well enough, right? And be a fun college receiver that has no projection into the NFL ranks that I can tell. I don't know what he's got. I mean, even Cordarrelle Patterson had rushing skills, had this versatility, had special teams ability, or it had some value as a first rounder. Like, you were like, well, he's a 0 as a receiver, but I mean, remember the time he lost it in the sun? There was a great play with him on the Vikings where he looked up and the sun was it blinded him and it hit him in the face mask in a game. Like, that's just something you don't see. It was great. It was very Cordarrelle Patterson as a receiver. It was very bad. But you saw why they wanted him, right? But I don't like Quentin Johnston. I don't know why they want him. I don't know what anyone that understands how professional football works watches him and goes, okay, we're going to deploy him like this, and he's going to do that, and this is how he's going to help us. I don't think that those questions were ever asked, and you couldn't find an answer anyway, right? Because you couldn't find an answer. So it's like I'm mystified, and I've never been this sure of an NFL player drafted in the first round not translating.
And I watched some of that training camp tape, and I was like, man, he is moving around well. Like, did I miss something? So I went back and I'm like, I'm going to look again because I didn't like anything I saw from him. And then as I was looking, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a hoax. Then the first padded practice came and he started dropping all his passes. And I was like, yep, that's what I figured. As soon as the pads come on, these guys like him are going to, all these hot camp stories are going to start falling apart.
I can't believe that we're here. You and me, we're here. It's been 10 years of us, finding reasons to like the Quentin Johnstons. Now, not Quentin Johnston exactly, because typically the guy's running a 4.4.
Yeah.
Right? The guy has more. Yeah, he doesn't have the worst possible agility score you could ever imagine. He's like he's 220. These guys have better speed scores, typically more athleticism to get your blood flowing. Right? Those are guys we would get excited about. Right? So not quite Quentin Johnston, but the bigger,
Hakeem
faster,
Butler.
Better Quentin Johnston's. Not Hakeem Butler. I'm thinking of like a Stephen Hill. Like, we got to wind back the clock, 10 years. Stephen Hill, maybe a Josh Dotson. Right? Someone like that where you're like, oh, this is going to be an exciting player to watch in the red zone on Sundays. Right? Fantasy football, 6 points. Great. Right? Well, over 10 years of watching all these players come and go, you start to develop a muscle memory for the cautionary tales. And so when a Quentin Johnston now comes across our desk, you and I, who've been following, because the whole goal was to say, hey, let's look at all the data that we have at our disposal, and we can figure out if these players are good or bad. And then as it turns out, their knucklehead factor, their dog rating, how they're wired, are they more Amon-Ra St. Brown, or are they more, Jamison Williams?
Toney.
Kadarius Toney. That matters a lot. that matters a lot, so much more than their athletic profile. And so now we're starting to incorporate more of that into our analysis, more of scheme fit and what is their route inventory and how does that translate? Okay, shaky hands. In what context, right? In what context, shaky hands? Shaky hands at the pro day? Ooh, that's bad, right? That's when it really matters, and they need to be focused, and they're not. Uh-oh, right? Shaky hands the first padded practice. Uh-oh, right? Shaky hands throughout their college career, right? Okay, you add all that. That's going to matter. And why is it going to matter? Because it's going to matter when an NFL coach is trying to decide how they're going to structure their personnel packages, and all those drops are going to be just playing in a loop in their brain, and it's going to cost that player opportunity. That's just it's how it's going to play out, where a lot of this sort of the simulating of how this actually works, I had very little to go on starting player profiler, and now we have so much muscle memory built up and so many lessons learned that now we can run the simulation based on this 10 years of observations and be like, okay, let me tell you how this is going to play out with Quentin Johnston.
And
right, let me tell you how it's going to play out with Zay Flowers. Right, and then we're going to be dead right, my friend.
And as we go, we're going to tweak the models. We're going to make these adjustments from what we've learned. We're not going to sit there with like the relative athletic score, that RAS score, and everybody's going to be a 10 because it was built in 2009 or whenever it was, when guys of today would have been mega stars 10, 15 years ago. But now there's 27 guys that have the same athleticism. Everybody can't be a 10 athlete anymore and get us excited. There's more to it than your Spark score or your RAS score or at wide receiver.
Especially at wide receiver.
Especially at wide receiver. And again, when I started 2013 and I thought about what the wide receiver position entails, the first thing that came to mind is athleticism. Like you're on the outside. Randy Moss.
Yeah, you're on the outside of the formation. You've got to beat the guy in front of you. You've got to beat him deep. You've got to beat him side to side. What does that require? It requires burst. It requires agility. And without that, how the hell are you going to win? And as it turns out, well, you can have one of those things, and really that's all you need, right? Amon-Ra has one of those things. He is explosive. And, he didn't do well in the 3-cone, right? And it turns out, you know what? Like, he can figure that shit out later, right?
Like
as it turns out, the deep speed isn't something that he even really needs. Terrell Owens didn't need it, and Jerry Rice didn't need it. And a lot of these receivers actually don't need the deep speed to put up 1,500-yard seasons.
In the movie Moneyball, there's that early scene where Brad Pitt is pointing to Jonah Hill, trying to make the case to his scouts that all they care about is he gets on base. So Brad Pitt would point and Jonah Hill would say he gets on base, till everybody, all the scouts in the room would answer when he pointed, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, he gets on base. With wide receivers, I don't care about a lot of stuff. They get open. The new lingo is, do they get open? Amon-Ra St. Brown gets open. Cooper Kupp gets open. Travis Kelce. How are these guys so wide open every play when everybody knows they're going to get the ball? Whatever it is, they get open. Devontae Adams gets open.
How is it that we can speak so well on this subject, so clearly? We're communicating in a way that it is not up for dispute. It doesn't need translation. And yet there are members of this audience that can't hear what we're saying and that cannot process the words that are coming from our mouths. I have this guy named Avatar in the chat on YouTube. He says the Chargers are going to throw 700 times. That's not true. And then he says all they have to do is teach him ball skills. That's not possible. This is not like some catastrophic situation. Yes, it is. They just need a first-round whipping boy. I don't know what that means. Okay, so that's just a weird thing to say. And nothing that he said was true. It was literally, this is quite literally, because he used a lot of words here to say a lot of things that were completely inaccurate or missed the point or didn't make any sense. So it's all nonsense and wrong information, misinformation, and just the most incorrect, incompetent comment in the history of this show. If he doesn't have the requisite route inventory, deep speed, and hands, when they try to play him on the outside because they want to play Allen and Williams inside now, is what we're hearing across the Chargers communications, they are envisioning more inside route running from Mike Williams as he gets older. Keenan Allen only runs across the middle and inside. That means Quentin Johnston must be an outside receiver. And if he can't offer those elements on the outside, he is useless. He will command 0 targets. He will not be part of these player personnel packages. It will be Josh Palmer. It will be Jalen Guyton. It will be literally anybody but him. And you see this time and time again where you're wondering, how did Josh Dotson barely play? Right? It was a combination of an injury and wasn't able to pick up the playbook and wasn't able to execute. Terrace Marshall looks like a complete and utter specimen and had very little target competition behind DJ Moore. It was like a dusty Robbie Anderson and Shi Smith. And these were players that were playing ahead of him because guess what? The coaches saw that Shi Smith can squeeze the football and that Shi Smith could run the route that's been designed for him. And so he's the one they're playing, even though you don't know him and he's not rostered in fantasy. It doesn't matter. He's the one that's going to be out there, not Quentin Johnston and not Terrace Marshall. Maybe in 3 years, we might be here with Terrace Marshall now. Where he is now will be where Quentin Johnston is in a few years, where we might be considering him a sleeper. Okay. Because he's learned all these things. He's become a better route runner incrementally over time. He's developed, better hands technique and better pass catching technique over time. And then, and maybe he can work on his speed and maybe he can work on all these things. And maybe he can be some kind of functional asset for the team in 2025.
And the whipping boy comment about the first round, just to circle back to that, what Matt and I are doing and what we've built over the last 10 years, we're not two fanboys in love with talking about football and ragging on first rounders so that we can high five each other about football takes.
Oh, is that what he's talking about? He's saying that we have to find a first rounder to hate?
Like a first round whipping boy is the way that I took it. You and I, because we've got no other ESPN or other push, we have got to be right on these things for our subscribers, for our customers, whether it's having them avoid Quentin Johnston in fantasy and dynasty, or whether it's betting their
or avoid Hakeem Butler
unders,
or whatever it is. All these players back their time, that even at a time when other fantasy analysts were ranking Hakeem Butler pre-draft as their number one fantasy rookie wide receiver, we had him on our do not draft list. It's one of those things where that's the thing we take the most pride in, identifying the players where they can't hurt you. Like Odell Beckham cannot hurt you this year. You shouldn't feel any desire or requirement to draft him because he cannot hurt you. Zay Flowers could absolutely hurt you. And you could be looking up week 10, week 11 and feel really bad you don't have any Zay Flowers, especially if you have a Lamar Jackson and you decided to stack him with Odell. Whoops. Then you're not going to feel good about that. So we're protecting you on all sides. That's our job.
And protecting and trying to make a profit. On my side, as the FanDuel DraftKings betting keeps coming more to life state by state, you can bet. Matt and I can be in agreement on this, and you can go and plunk down X amount of dollars on the under on Quentin Johnston if you like the bet. You can bet on Quentin Johnston's over under touchdowns, yards, whether he's going to be the leading.
It's not a hot take. This guy is an idiot. He is the lowest IQ commenter we've ever had. He says it's okay to be a hot take guy. It's your brand. but let's keep 1 foot in reality. That's all we're doing. You have to understand, those that are retweeting Quentin Johnston making a spectacular one-hand catch in shorts are the ones that are not living in reality. They're living in this fake world of fake football that doesn't exist, where there's no cornerback and there's no pressure on him. The moment the pressure is added, whether it's at his pro day or when the pads come on, he falls apart. He crumbles. That's what he is. That is the reality. We're speaking reality, not to be hot take artists. It's not comfortable. I would love to love every player, especially the first round picks. That's the comfortable place to be, right? That's where Steve Smith is and all these guys, they love everybody, right? It's a lot of pressure to actually come out and say, you know what? Based on the data and how we process everything we're seeing and consuming and observing, actually, this guy had no business in the first round, and he has no business being drafted in the first round of your Dynasty League. And if you believe that we're being hot take artists and we're just trying to be, provocative, then you're clearly new to this. You're a new listener. And there's a lot of people like that, RC. I've won over countless people that thought that, the first time they heard a show, it was a bunch of hot takes. And then the next thing they look up and go, oh, wait, this is all happening. This is the reality. And what I'm seeing on ESPN is just hot air and hype and fake.
And when the scenarios change, with the game changes, when the ADP changes, like Matt was saying, 3 years from now, we might be talking about Quentin Johnston as a bargain. Who knows
Maybe.
what's going to develop over in a couple of years. We're talking about what we know right now.
Terrace Marshall's a sleeper. Terrace Marshall's a sleeper that I'll draft. Oh, yeah. And I do give players the benefit of the doubt that they are professionals, that they reach the league, and that they're going to start learning, evolving, and improving. And I want to give them the opportunity to do that. But drafting them as rookies where they're drawing dead with bad quarterback play is wrong-headed.
Burning a number 6 pick in your rookie draft, just throwing it in the trash. We're trying to help you avoid that.
How many times you look up and people are just burning rookie picks to the ground? They're lighting them on fire. It makes no sense. Some of these picks and these rookie, you're like, you're drawing dead here. What do you think what do you think you're going to get? Right? You're going to be turning around next year and wishing that you had just traded out of that pick or drafted the 3 receivers that came after that. Like with Jonathan Mingo, I want to know. I really want to know, when people are drafting Jonathan Mingo over Jayden Reed and over Marvin Mims, which is more likely than not, same with Rashee Rice, right? But with Mingo especially, at least with Rashee Rice, you could say, oh, well, there's Patrick Mahomes. And there, in the second round, with a guy that does have a 1,300-yard season on his resume and actually was prolific in a way that Quentin Johnston was not, right? I'm going to listen to that argument for a longer period of time and internalize a little more than I will anything about Quentin Johnston, right? Any Quentin Johnston hype. Sure. Okay. I'm listening. I'm listening on this Rashee Rice thing. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. But Jonathan Mingo? What realistically is going to play out in his favor this year to make him someone you're actually starting in fantasy football? Like, put it this way. Think about DFS. In what scenario? What's the scenario where you're like, oh, this is an upside play at 3,900 on DraftKings? It does. I can't even imagine it in fiction, like projecting any realistic, like hypothetical scenario of what you could be looking at in week 10 to say, yes, okay, Mingo's my guy this week.
But they're going to make the double scouting mistake. You're going to make both ends of the mistake of, you got the Mingo side of it, but I'm sure everyone thinks Bryce Young is the next Patrick Mahomes or close to it. And even if you liked Mingo, you've got a Bryce Young problem you got to deal with. If you want hot takes, if you think us ragging on Quentin Johnston is bad, wait till we tear down Bryce Young. Not that he's terrible, but he's not going to make Mingo or anybody.
What are we talking about here? He's just because his dad was a coach and trained him to say all the right things. That's enough to get drafted in 101. It's crazy. And then also Jonathan Mingo. The talk is, well, we'll make him a slot receiver. Okay, no, that talk has to happen when you're 29 and you're Mike Williams, right? And you've had some 1,000-yard seasons as an outside clasher, and now it's time for you to start being a little more versatile because you're not as fast. You can't win on the outside like you could 3 years ago. That makes sense. When you're 23 years old and you're 6'3", 220, then your life needs to be lived on the outside. And if there's any talk of you moving inside, it's to cover up for wallpaper over clear weaknesses where already the coaches are like, oh, I think we made a mistake with this guy. Already the front office is like, ooh, this is not. Maybe we should have drafted a big wide receiver that was really productive or could separate in college.
And a third error in the chain is going to be, well, Frank Reich's got Bryce Young. I mean, Frank Reich was arguably a worse head coach than Nathaniel Hackett last year. And for 3 years, the guy who's a quarterback guru had Phillip Rivers' worst year, then is Carson Wentz's worst year, then Matt Ryan's abomination last year, then Ellinger's pivot. So if you had any hope for Bryce Young to become something because Frank Reich is there to save the day, I don't think you're going to get that part of the chain either. So Mingo's got a lot of toxic garbage backed up behind him before he gets to relevancy.
And what you're saying is the complete opposite of what I was seeing in the chat, because I like to read the chats in these drafts just to lurk around and see what the guy that drafts Mingo says. And he's like, oh my God, you got this guy tethered to Bryce Young for the next 4 years and Frank Reich.
That's what I
and
maybe.
And you're like we're bringing this up, and we're not making this up. Like, this isn't a narrative or a thought process that we're making up. These are real Dynasty gamers in the chat. This is what's driving these decisions to go Mingo. Maybe and not Jayden Reed, because Jayden Reed's got Jordan Love, which is a big problem. Okay, Jordan Love is more likely than not going to bust. He was not accurate in college, and the idea that he suddenly has learned to be accurate is similar fantasy, is similar farce.
He's the
around
first
the idea that Quentin
benched.
Johnston's going to learn how to catch. Right,
First
that's not going to happen.
quarterback to get benched this year is going to be Jordan Love.
Right, so Sean Clifford becomes interesting.
I think Alex Magoo becomes interesting.
We'll talk about that in our overtime segment. We're going to get into an overtime segment about this, but
oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
That's why these are some interesting names for superflex leagues and deep superflex and 2QB dynasty leagues, because you need to figure out which of the quarterbacks is most likely to bust that are currently starters, and that's part of the reason why a Jayden Reed can slip to the very end of the second round, and I'm always so happy when it happens. So thrilled, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this guy. This is incredible, right? And so he could be the best of this class. I know it's probably going to be a Zay Flowers or a JSN, right? I put my money on JSN, you put your money on Zay Flowers, that's fine. But beyond them, right? If you're talking about comps to Jordan Addison in particular, Jayden Reed in a vacuum is that kind of special.
Yeah. I like Jayden Reed right there with Marvin Mims.
And Jayden Reed is not getting drafted high because of this Packers situation and the fact that there's Christian Watson there, right? So he's got the perception is he's going to be the clear number 2, and there's no path to being a number 1. Okay, well, that's also Jordan Addison, by the way, right? So if that's your problem, that this guy's a clear number 2, well, there's a bunch of receivers where that's a clear problem. Jameson Williams, right? Why would you ever, if that's going to be Jameson Williams' problem for the rest of his time in Detroit? He's never going to have an opportunity to be the number 1. Big deal, right? But all I know is that at Western Michigan, as a true freshman, at age 18, Reed was a special team star, 70% catch rate, and commanded that 80 targets. And so that's the commonality that I'm seeing. These guys, whether it be Michael Wilson, Jayden Reed, you're seeing guys that came in as fully formed adults at age 18 in college football and were productive and impressive. And I'm going to take those guys over the Jonathan Mingo late bloomers all day. And Reed ends up transferring, right? He had the COVID year where he barely played and he transferred. Okay, that's why he came out as a senior. Right, so there's explanations to why he came out as a senior that Rashee Rice does not have.
And
right, but I understand if with Rashee Rice, you said the situation. We're going to look up in 5 years, and it's going to be a joke. It's going to be a joke. It's going to be Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor all over again. We were drafting Rice because of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid, and avoiding Jayden Reed, because of the situation in Green Bay and the quarterback situation, super uncertain and volatile, and likely a run-first offense. And you're like, you know what? But guess what? They upgrade the quarterback next year. They change the offensive coordinator. A year from now, this could be a pass-first offense. Who knows? It's Dynasty. You don't make these decisions based on what you think's going to happen or the team situation's going to look like in year 1. You draft these guys for the next 5 years of their career. And Jayden Reed, in a vacuum, just is a far superior prospect to Rashee Rice. And the beauty is, RC, is we got to see it in Mobile. You got to see them back-to-back in Mobile, and it was just the most clear-cut thing that Jayden Reed was the alpha.
And I wouldn't let the training camp hysteria MVP from last year, Romeo Doubs, throw you either. Like, oh, he's got to get past Watson and Doubs.
Oh, don't forget about Doubs. Oh, yeah, don't forget about Doubs.
There's a class. I don't know what label we should give them, but there's a group of wide receivers, Jalen Tolbert, Romeo Doubs, Keyshawn Johnson, that have really good hands and are really nice college wide receivers. They can catch passes, but they're the opposite of what we're talking about with Zay Flowers, like the Moneyball line. They can't get open. Zay Flowers, he gets open. Travis Kelce, he gets open. Kupp, he gets open. Michael Wilson, he gets open. Romeo Doubs doesn't get open. He, in one-on-one and some training camp things, he's got sticky hands. He'll make a couple nice catches, but when it got real, where did Romeo Doubs wind up last year? Where did Jalen Tolbert, the great Jalen Tolbert for the Cowboys last year, after training camp and we hit the preseason regular, where did he wind up? So there's a class of guys.
Jalen Tolbert is not dead yet. Jalen Tolbert, according to Cowboys insiders, had a very difficult time picking up the playbook because he was coming from such a small school with a basic offense and just got totally overwhelmed by the playbook. That can happen. It's a very bad sign. It's not good because your mental acuity, again, this is something 10 years ago I did not appreciate, but the mental acuity of a Stephon Diggs, of a Justin Jefferson, of a Cooper Kupp really matters. Knowing where to be based on the coverage that you're seeing and to time things up with your quarterback, it's not just about physical skills. It's about that ability to recognize what the defense is showing you and then being able to simulate and empathize with your quarterback, what they're seeing, and knowing where they think that you should be. And then so based on what you can perceive the defense is showing to the quarterback, you're going to go ahead and be to that spot where the quarterback would love you to be at that moment, and then you're going to go ahead and go there. That split-second decision-making and mental processing is what makes being a rookie wide receiver very challenging, and why a lot of these guys that put up the biggest numbers as rookie wide receivers do it with touchdowns. Claypool and Christian Watson last year, two of the best examples, I would say, of that. You agree with that?
I agree. And as I'm thinking about the Dallas situation, the difference between guy who can catch ball in training camp without the full pads and the full, top line coverage, like Jalen Tolbert, versus an undrafted free agent guy like Dennis Houston, who he gets open. That's why he got elevated to the main roster. That's why he was playing in a rotation early into the season out of absolutely nowhere, because while Jalen Tolbert had his ass on the sidelines, Dennis Houston came out of nowhere and was playing because he gets open.
I love when you give us these deep sleeper dynasty receivers for stashing purposes like Dennis Houston, and then the rookies like A.T. Perry. Absolutely love it. And it makes me the best example where we were taken behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the level of mental processing in the moment has to be Cooper Kupp. Remember this play? Remember when they were interviewing after the fact? He was talking about fire zones. You remember this? Let's play it.
Good.
Your defender went and blitzed. What did you see there? How were you able to use that to your advantage?
Yeah, they just had a little 3-deep fire zone, brought the nickel off the edge, safety dropped down. It didn't look like they were doing a replacement fire zone, so I knew at the back away we were going to get three pushing through. I had an opportunity to kind of run in there if I could beat my guy, and just had to beat the safety to the end zone.
What the fuck is a replacement fire zone, dude? He had me at replacement fire zone. When someone comes in and is like, yeah, so it was a fire zone, and when it's a fire zone, I do this, and that's fine. That's fine. That would make sense to me. I'm sure there's a bunch of wide receivers that have that level of mental acuity in the moment. But then to also recognize that they were clearly not going to be falling back to a replacement fire zone. Can we play it again? Can we play it again?
Hit me.
Touchdown specifically, your defender went and blitzed. What did you see there? How were you able to use that to your advantage?
Yeah, they just had a little 3-deep fire zone, brought the nickel off the edge, safety dropped down. It didn't look like they were doing a replacement fire zone, so I knew at the back away we were going to get three pushing through. I had an opportunity to kind of run in there if I could beat my guy, and just had to beat the safety to the end zone.
See, that the other part of it is that how nonchalant they are about what's necessary. Right? I just had to beat my guy to the end zone. Yeah. Put me out there.
She understood all what he was saying.
Yeah. And I'm like, if you just gave me the intelligence in the situation like Cooper Kupp, I could do it. We could all be receivers, right? You and me. We just need to see the RC. The thing is, once you recognize all that and you see that they're not actually going to be running a replacement fire zone, then you just need to beat your guy to the end zone. And need to beat a professional athlete to the end zone. That's it.
I could never identify the replacement for the fire zone. I just never could.
Well, that's the thing. He's like, well, then I didn't identify the replacement fire zone. So then at the moment I realized they weren't going to be running a replacement fire zone. So not only was there not a fire zone, there was no replacement fire zone. And in that, so we've iterated on this multiple times, me and Matthew Stafford. And then so when there's no fire zone and yet no replacement fire zone, then I just beat my guy to the end zone as a touchdown.
I'd like to see that clip up against something Jameson Williams says about playing wide, or something Kadarius Toney says about Giants fans.
Oh, it was a hot take that you guys were just picking on Kadarius Toney as a first rounder to criticize. Yeah, you didn't give him a chance. Like, he could develop, right? He could develop durability and mental acuity and actual wide receiver skills, though he played mostly running back in college. Like, he could develop all this stuff. You need to give him a chance, guys. You're hot taking. You're hot take artists. You need to give us some reality, right? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No. This guy can't play. And Jameson Williams was a theoretical projection in a guy that you can draft later on. You don't need to burn, just like, NFL teams make the same mistake that Dynasty Leaguers do. They burn first-round picks to the ground that they don't have to. The tactical value that you were going to try and go get with Jameson Williams in the first round was available in the second round with Tyquon Thornton, was available in the fourth round with Calvin Austin. It was just a complete and utter misuse of resources to take a guy that you can get the majority of what he's bringing to the table rounds later. To take that guy in the first round is always a mistake, just like drafting a running back in the first round is a mistake. It's always a mistake. Where there are players in the first round like Christian Darrisaw, where it's like, this guy shouldn't even be at pick 20, and we're just lucky to get him. And these players simply aren't available in round 2 and beyond. That's the only types of players you should be looking to draft in the first round of the NFL draft, if you're an NFL GM, are the players that are never available in round 2 and beyond, tactically, functionally.
And for reality's sake, I was lusting after Chase Claypool. I was lusting after Kadarius Toney and all of the possibilities. I'm in 2023 coming from the world of, I've been there. I've touched that rail. It's going to electrocute you. I need to stop doing that. So it took me a while to learn it, but 2023 has been the year of discovery and eye-opening on the types of wide receivers and clues and things that we should be looking for and what we should be avoiding. So it's not like we're hitting on these with 100% hit rate for the last 10 years. Some of this is learning the School of Hard Knocks version.
Oh yeah, I mean, if that like 2017 draft were today, we would have been higher on Cooper Kupp, right? We would have been higher on Cooper Kupp and lower on Corey Davis, but Corey Davis had the size and was a prolific college receiver, and had more theoretical upside as a true NFL X receiver. But the NFL has changed as our evaluation schema has changed. And so, if we could rerun the 2017 draft, our evaluations would be very different. And that's.
But we do. That's why we're here now.
That's part of the process. And specifically with wide receivers, you and I did not talk about this, right? Typically, when you and I talk, we end up discussing running back more than receivers. This is an unusual show for us in that way. But we did not talk beforehand and brainstorm our show sheet. I just sent you the show sheet. And then you looked at the show sheet and you were like, oh, this is exactly what I want to talk about, because he's coming at this from a new perspective that I now have renewed. And so this is going to be the perfect thing to talk about. And it was just a mind meld. It was not planned that we would go so deep with wide receivers in this case. And there's a podcast on the network called The Undrafted with Jax Falcone. And he does a lot of the same sort of things that we're talking about, where he'll have a take and it sounds like a hot take and he'll get accused of hot taking. And it's just like, hey, this guy's going with a player off the board that he likes, and he likes him for all the right reasons and a lot of lessons learned over the years. And you don't have to be on board with it. You can call him a hot take artist, but that's actually not where he's coming from. And so it's a great podcast. Yeah, and I'm going to be on it hopefully more in the weeks and months ahead, because I love Jax. I love hanging out with him. He's just a great podcaster, and the information is excellent, and it's Dynasty focused. It's called The Undrafted. from the Undroppables. And so that's just another one of the podcasts we've added to our network, to our YouTube channel in this past year that I'm really proud of. Let's talk about the Bears, because we mentioned DJ Moore in passing while talking about Terrace Marshall, and we've mentioned Ohio State quarterbacks. We're higher on Ohio State quarterbacks generally than, for some reason, like the public loves Alabama quarterbacks until they don't, like Mac Jones, and they don't like Ohio State quarterbacks, and I don't understand it. So let's talk about the Bears. Let's talk about Justin Fields. Let's talk about DJ Moore.
I like Justin Fields for fantasy, for the running tallies, obviously. I'm not in love with him as a passer. He's going to have a plausible enough passing in and of himself to go with the rushing to be probably a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Whether he's going to take DJ Moore to another level, I like DJ Moore, but he always seems to get stuck into situations with quarterbacks that just don't give the volume that's going to take him to that next level. He's always good, but I don't think he can get to this next level that it seems like he's wanted to, like he's been on the verge of. I don't think Justin Fields can get him there. The volume of that passing game is so low, and I mean, Claypool's a knucklehead, but if he's on the field, he's going to command targets. Darnell Mooney is a really good receiver, and I just don't know if there's going to be enough to go around for DJ Moore to fully break out. I think he's fine. I think he's worth his ADP. Potentially, there are other guys, wide receivers in that area that I might like better, but there's a lot I would like worse. But I don't know that DJ Moore can get cranked up another level by Justin Fields. Just too many low volume, low pass attempt games for me to get excited about plucking the wide receiver off of it. Like if we're talking Moores, I would rather have Skyy Moore than DJ Moore. And DJ Moore is probably a better wide receiver for the NFL, more experience and everything else. But Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, are going to have double the yardage per game, double the touchdown passes, or 1.5 times the touchdown passes. I mean, the Bears were 32 in pass attempt last year. Beyond Atlanta and Tennessee, that's their thing. Justin Fields discovered he's a great runner before he discovered he was a great runner about 6 weeks into the season. He was on the brink of them talking about, we're going to have to draft another quarterback. We need to get rid of Justin Fields. This is a bust. Then he started running. Then the passing numbers got better for touchdown purposes, efficiency purposes, but the volume, most of his games are 160 yards passing or less. And I'm more concerned DJ's not going to get enough to go to the next level.
But it's possible that he throws more.
Possible.
It's possible. Their defense is one of the worst in the league. They're going to have to compete with up-tempo offenses in Detroit and in Minnesota specifically. We talked about players that were devalued in college, and Fields falling to the 10th pick is a devaluation. He never should have been there. He was just like C.J. Stroud. We're like, this guy's the number 2 behind Lawrence. Stroud should be number 1. And then they get disrespected throughout the pre-draft process for some reason. I don't understand why, right? In 2020, Ohio State only played in 8 games because of COVID. He had 2,100 yards. So he was on track to put up close to 4,000 yards that year and 40 touchdowns and less than 10 interceptions. The year before that, he put up 40 and 3. 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. This is exactly what you're looking for with a 9+ yards per attempt as a passer. So he can be a prolific passer. It has happened before. What I don't like is how the volume, the pass attempt volume, did not rise. It actually dropped at the end of the season. He finished out the year, Philadelphia, 21 pass attempts, Buffalo, 23, Detroit, 21. Right? Where they started to crank it up in the middle of the season against Miami, against Washington, and then they decided to pull it back again. Right? He doesn't have a year, a season, a game. He doesn't have a game with significant air yards. Right? The most air yards he's ever put up, 274. So this I understand. But I love that it did incrementally go up. I love that he has a zoomed out background of being a prolific passer in college. And I love that starting in week 7, his completion percentage was 60 or above every week until the last week of the season, until the last game. What I don't love is that one year he has a fractured shoulder. Another year he has a rib fracture. And this is part of the cost of rushing, right? The running is going to cost him games, right? So that's an issue. But he's 24 years old. I loved his college profile, and I think that there likely is enough volume for this to be an exciting pass attack. But because Darnell Mooney is so good, and Cole Kmet is good, right? And Roschon Johnson out of the backfield is a quality receiver.
And Claypool's
it's probably not going to be enough target volume. I think you're right. I think that given that if you're going to be operating in one of these sort of mobile quarterback-centric offenses that is going to be bottom 5 in the league in pass attempts, and the Bears are going to be bottom 5. Like, it's a win if they're ranked like 28. That's huge. That's way better than last, right? That's great. But in that case, you need to be the clear number 1 and you need to command a huge target share. I think that DJ Moore can do it because it's very possible that Chase Claypool, who started camp mysteriously on the PUP for no reason, just doesn't want to be there. Just decides he doesn't want to be a football player. Then we're down to 2 receivers that anyone cares about. Then it can become very interesting very quickly if it's consolidated, the targets are consolidated just to Kmet, Mooney, and Moore. So there is a case for Moore this year. But I agree with you. The median projection is going to be, hey, this is another wide receiver 2 season for DJ Moore.
Yeah, that's my fear, is that he's fairly priced, which is nothing wrong with that, but I don't know he's going to have a breakout.
I do like knowing what I'm getting, though.
Yeah,
it is nice that you're in a draft like last year, right? You could have drafted Darnell Mooney last year in the 4th round. There was a ton of players being drafted. There was Adam Thielen. There were so many players being drafted around 4, 5, 6. Where you were terrified of what you were going to get. And, even earlier, Allen Robinson, right? So you have potential, huge, dangerous landmines that at least with DJ Moore, if you're going to be using a top 50 pick, and that's what it's going to take to get him, a top 50 pick, he's going right at pick 50 at the FFPC, which is tight end premium, which means he's necessarily a top 50 pick in other leagues. I love that I just know what I'm getting from him. Every year he plays 17 games. He has a clean injury track record. He's efficient every year. His air yard share last year was 48%. It was number 1 in the league. So he's also shown this versatility that he can operate downfield like he did last year or closer to the line of scrimmage as he's done in earlier years. Top 20 in yards per team pass attempt. Top 10 in dominator rating.
There's a case for guys like him that aren't going to burn you, because you in that same ADP range sits Chris Godwin, and you would probably say I like Godwin better than Moore, but then you throw the injury factor in, and you might get back to where it's a pick-em between the two of them.
Well, you're talking about 2 of my favorite veteran receivers. You're talking about 2 of the guys that I love in that range, specifically because I trust them.
Yeah.
Because I know it's valuable capital. If I'm going to be you have a whole. Here's the thing. When I talk to fantasy gamers, like on the street, or casually at a party, whatever it is, and they're talking about these huge swings they want to take, right? And my reaction is almost always, why? Like Breece Hall in the 3rd round, 4th round. Why? He's coming off a torn ACL. Like, there's a bunch of running backs there already that either, impressed last year like Zonovan Knight, or have all-purpose skill sets like Michael Carter, or that they drafted with explosiveness like Israel Abanikanda. There's just a lot of options there, plus they're talking to Dalvin Cook, right? So why do that to yourself? Like, why? You don't need to. You have the entire second half of your dynasty draft to take swing. You can take huge swings.
Yep.
We're talking about drafting Michael Wilson, for Christ's sake. Go ahead. Take all the swings. You have half of your picks you can devote just to giant, hairy swings. Why do it with your fifth round pick? Don't do it. DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, and don't worry about it. You're getting a top 10 talent at the position. You're getting guys that command giant, incredible volume, either looking at air yard share, target share, or both. So you don't need to be a hero in these early rounds. It's bizarre to me. This desire for heroics in these early rounds where it's like, hey, I'm pretty conservative here. Like, why are you going Bijan in the middle of the first round? Why? If you are talking to a fantasy gamer and they're saying, I'm going to draft Bijan no matter what, first round, I'm so excited, I'm so hyped, what is your reaction to that?
I would tell them that they are insane not to do it. And I would tell them the same if they're going to take Bijan at 101. Now, you should take Bijan at 101, and maybe depending on your league, you should take Bijan in the first round of your redraft if you have the intention of taking that chip and flipping it for other things that you want, because Bijan's so out of his mind, crazy in everybody's fantasy minds, that you can turn him into 2 or 3 things. But outside of that, I'm not endorsing. I don't think Bijan Robinson is that good.
Billy Muzio thinks like we think, right? Billy Muzio's our number one fantasy ranker here. And, he comes to me and he says, I got to tell you, I want to be upfront with you about something. Dario, Theo, and I, we're talking about the projections and everything, and we've got all this machine learning in place, but also just human instincts, and we're not going to have Bijan in the first round. I just want to let you know, because it's going to be considered hot where we have him. And I'm like, and I didn't even blink. I was like, yeah, sure, I'm sure that's fine. Like, whatever. No one should be drafting that guy in the first round. That's insane. He's like, really? Because he's going like at pick 6 and 7. And I'm like, well, I didn't even know that. And that's good information. And all those people are setting themselves up for failure, because if that's the way you're wired, if that's your sort of operating procedure, then you're going to have a bad draft anyway. You're going to make a ton of other mistakes. Like, I'm sure that person was drafting Kadarius Toney, and like, it was just like, it's like, if you're taking these kinds of giant risks in the first round, then you're going to be just all risk, right? All risk drafts don't ever work out. You don't need to be a hero. Like, you could just draft a Travis Kelce and lock in that advantage of that position. And you're talking about a guy with a clean injury track record that always shows up every year, that always has the giant target share, that's always near the top of his position. And he's proven. And yeah, he's now in his 30s. And like, it's like,
and they've been saying that for 3 years. Like, he's old. How many more years in a row are you going to say it?
But there are plenty of people drafting Bijan over Travis Kelce, and it's like, no. No. Also, Bijan over Cooper Kupp.
And
drafted this guy. They're drafting Bijan over the guy with this, who said this after a game.
Touchdown specifically, your defender went and blitzed. What did you see there? How were you able to use that to your advantage?
Yeah, they set a little 3 deep fire zone, brought the nickel off the edge, safety dropped down. It didn't look like they were doing a replacement fire zone, so I knew with the back away we were going to get 3 pushing through. I had an opportunity to kind of run in there if I could beat my guy, and just had to beat the safety to the end zone.
Yeah, I want that guy. I think I'm going to draft him.
And it's not even for me, just to kick this Bijan thing around a little more, for me, it's not that, the workload in Atlanta, the possible split with Tyler Algier, how good can the Falcons offense be and all that. I have watched Bijan Robinson tape more than any player this year, because every time I watch it, I go, I do not see the guy that everybody is talking about. They are talking about this guy like he's the greatest running back that's ever put on a pair of cleats. And I'm watching Texas tape and I'm like, I'm not sure he's the best running back on his own team. What are you talking about? The greatest running back in the history of our lifetimes. Now, he's not terrible. He's not going to be a bust or anything, but he is not. I never put on the tape, and I keep putting it on because I'm like, everyone is so convinced. Like, I got to be really sure I didn't miss something. Maybe I missed this magical creature. And every time I put it on, I go, this is like me watching David Montgomery when everybody was over the moon with him, his rookie season. Like, I just don't see it. And you could see the numbers and the performance against better defenses that the yards per carry isn't there. And then you can see him against Roshan, and you're like, I can't tell the difference between these two guys. But I think the Roshan guy might be better.
There it is. Yes. Thought experiment. Okay, so Bijan is a really cool name. Bijan. It's one of the cooler names. Like remember those mustard commercials? Those Dijon mustard commercials. Please pass the Grey Poupon. Could you have any Grey Poupon, please? And there would be a guy in a limousine rolling the window down with the French accent. Oh, do you have any Grey Poupon? Right? Oh, but of course. Right? It's just, Bijan. Yes, Bijan Robinson. Yes. It sounds elegant. It sounds luxurious. He sounds like a sports car. Bijan Robinson. It sounds like you might be in a Bijan. Like, I'm surprised Tesla hasn't come out with a Bijan model yet. They probably, their factories are in Texas. Why not? Right? If his name was Danny Robinson, I'm just saying, if his name was Danny Robinson.
If his name was Michael Wilson.
Yeah. No one would be as hyped about that guy as they are Bijan Robinson. It's just that there's something about that. There's a little bit of extra.
Definitely stuff about names.
There's a name and look mystique. He looks the part. He has the perfect demeanor and disposition. He's just been branded as such. Like, the Bijan brand is strong. It is strong. And you feel bad for Roshan, too, because Roshan's a cool name also. But he wasn't quite Bijan Robinson. And just because he wasn't quite Bijan Robinson, he was going to have to be dealing with a lot fewer touches, right? And he was just going to have to eat it, right? And some people weren't ready to do that, and they decided to leave and go to USC, right?
Yep.
But he said, you know what? He is very much like an Isiah Pacheco, where he's like a team captain guy, right? He's a team first guy, and he doesn't care. He doesn't need to get out of town. He's going to stay. And he's going to make a go of it, even though he's just not quite that guy. But if you talk to most football fans and fantasy footballers in particular, they believe there's a chasm between those two guys. They believe it's not even close between Bijan and Roshan. And anyone, especially like I talked to Alex Dunlap, and he writes for Orange Bloods, and he's very close to that program. And he's like, it's always been super close between these two guys. It's just that when one guy's slightly ahead in all these categories, he's just going to get the lion's share of the touches. And then it's going to fall, the rest will fall to the next guy. And of course, Keontae Ingram's going to have to leave. Right? So you shouldn't feel bad. You shouldn't criticize Keontae Ingram. That's like the most well-justified transfer ever for a running back. And you absolutely should be feeling blessed to get Roschon at value, and don't fall too hard for Bijan. That's the lesson from that Texas backfield and how it played out.
And you're getting a psyop unwittingly on you when all we get is ESPN or The Athletic or USA Today, and all they try to do is out Bijan each other because it's been established that the guy's the greatest. So the next person that talks about Bijan has to go one step more in superlatives about how magical. Like, I heard Bijan Robinson compared to Barry Sanders. I almost just quit the business and said, I'm not doing this anymore. This is ridiculous. I mean,
when Rashod White outscores him, it's in fantasy football, it's going to be a beautiful day. It's going to be a beautiful day, and it's not anything to do with him. He's, as far as I can tell, a fantastic human being and a great athlete, and I appreciate him and I respect him very much. But these are similar players in similar situations. You have a running back who's the clear number one on a team that is heading in the wrong direction, in the wrong conference, in the wrong division. Okay? You have an NFC South team that's going to be run first in low-scoring games. That's Atlanta. So the idea that in that context with London and Pitts, that Bijan's going to command any kind of target share is just fiction. Okay? And in the other end, I understand that I don't think that the Buccaneers are going to score a lot of points, but they're going to have to throw because their defense has gotten old very fast, right? So, and Rashod White has always and forever been a better receiver than Bijan Robinson. And there's no one on that depth chart that is trustworthy with their ball skills in the red zone. So the red zone touch rate at running back is going to be just as high for White as it will be for Bijan, if not higher, because Rashod White doesn't have to compete with a Tyler Algier, who's a trustworthy, super solid, well-built, highly skilled, all-purpose back. He just has Chase Edmonds and Keyshawn Vaughn, who are notorious fumblers, especially in the red zone. It's what got Chase Edmonds chased out of Miami, were fumbles inside the 5. So all the touches inside the 5 are going to go to Rashod White out of the backfield. Probably a higher rate of red zone and green zone touches are going to go to Rashod White than Bijan Robinson. So in that context, the argument must be that Atlanta is going to be a much better offense. But you can't make that argument. One has the number one overall quarterback in the draft a few years ago who's been a bust. The other has a third-round pick who is a mobile game manager at quarterback.
It was a worse Daniel Jones. The other wrinkle going against Bijan Robinson is going to be when defenses prepare to play Tampa Bay, they're going to play their normal defense and tackle whatever ball carrier gets the ball out of the backfield. When defenses plan for Atlanta, they're going to spend the entire week planning for Bijan Robinson because he's a known unicorn from another land. And so when Algier comes in, they're going to be like, oh, let's go to our regular defense. Let's just play, a normal base here. But when Bijan comes in, everybody's moving forward. That's what happened to Najee Harris, and Najee Harris is not as good as Bijan Robinson. But I don't think that Bijan's that great either. But Najee didn't stand a chance when defenses were stacking 8 and 9 and 10 every time he got the ball, and then Mike Tomlin was stupid enough to keep giving it to him into the teeth of it.
So I said earlier that we're probably not going to go 3 hours. We're going 3 hours. we are going 3 hours because we haven't even gotten to 10 burning questions. So that's the thing. We've got to get to 10 burning questions, and we're going to get 10 burning questions with RC Fisher after this. Hey, we're all starting new fantasy leagues all the time. And more often than not, where do we start our fantasy leagues at Player Profiler? On Sleeper. Because it's the best. You can imagine my excitement when I saw Sleeper rolled out. Sleeper picks, baby. Now, you know I love Kenny Pickett, right? Week 1, who does he face? San Francisco. That's a bummer. So I'm going to be going less than on Kenny Pickett's projected yardage and on whichever quarterback is starting for San Francisco in Week 1. Probably not Trey Lance. But then, who do the Steelers face in Week 2? The Browns, right? We think the Browns are going to crank things up. So there, you can say, hey, Kenny Pickett, more than his projected passing yards. And you keep on correlating. Elijah Moore, more than. George Pickens, more than. And if you pick up to 8, that's how you 100x your payout on Sleeper. It's called the Hail Mary. So if you use promo code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match. Check out Sleeper's terms and conditions for details. These Sleeper picks are live in over 25 states. Yeah, buddy.
I like that guy.
He knows how to give a good promo on a fantasy football podcast here and there.
Sizzle.
Here and there. He does okay. I think if we actually go into rapid fire mode, then we will still go over 3 hours, but we will finish the show sheet.
Okay.
So let's go into at least a nominal best we can try effort, 10 burning questions in a faster than usual way of laying out the information. That's the best we can, because we can't really, I'm saying all this and I'm stumbling because we can't really do rapid fire. There's no way we're doing rapid fire. I've tried to do rapid fire many times. I've tried to even do rapid fire with RC Fisher, and it's just not possible. It's not something we can do. So we, the rapid fire. That's the thing. You think it's rapid fire, and you think you're just going to have a few bullets. And then this is the problem with our rapid fire segments. They just keep going and going and going. So it's not real rapid fire at all. It's anything but rapid fire.
That's me answering one question.
That's what happens when I try to ask you to answer questions in rapid fire mode. That's what ends up happening. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist, so we're going to not even pretend to try, but we are going to try to at least go faster. Whatever this go faster mode, we're going into go faster mode. That's what this is. Fast-ish, a little bit faster than normal mode. A little bit faster than normal mode. So we mentioned Justin Fields. I'm a more bullish believer in Fields than you are. If you can't even get Fields, and in that promo, that sleeper promo, did talk about Kenny Pickett. So where are you at if these Lamar Jacksons and Fields and Herberts are gone? Who are your targets in the later rounds at quarterback? Your top 5. Let's say your top 5 late round quarterbacks.
The later round, I'm going to save my top one to the end, but the other 4 I could put
end of the show or the end of the list?
No, end of the list.
Okay.
Playing it safe, I could go Geno or Goff as a later round quarterback. If you have to, I mean, if you're taking all the good ones away from me and I'm fading back in,
you're going with a pocket passer.
If I have to, I have to name 5 of them. I can't do, and I won't put Daniel Jones on this list.
Well, Daniel Jones, just so I could have your support you here. Daniel Jones was widely criticized, mocked, and dismissed for many, many years in the NFL. Then he had one good year, and now everyone thinks he's like the most underrated, best player.
Yeah, 2022 proved a lot of these guys that we written off for dead, like Geno Smith, like Daniel Jones, if you get a little offensive line going in today's league where there's less hits to the quarterback and less hits to the receivers and everything else, you too can be an NFL quarterback. So that's why I put into a bucket
That
a
is
Geno.
shocking. So the Giants, let me get this straight, RC. The Giants spend a couple of years drafting quality offensive linemen in the first round in the top 10, and then suddenly their quarterback performs well. That is wild. That is crazy. I can't believe it. Oh, they just Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal, and then that solves it? Really? That's crazy. That's good for C.J. Stroud, by the way.
It's good for Stroud, a good coach with Dable coming over. Everything hit at the right time. But we saw Geno come to life. Jared Goff's got a good offense, great offensive line. I like Brock Purdy, but Kenny Pickett is right in that mix as well. Of all those guys are stable guys. You could argue which one is ahead of the other.
Steelers.
Good.
No, this is my fault. Okay, I was it seemed like I was blaming you for the lack of ability of rapid fire, but really it's me. It's really me. It's me. It's not you. It's me. It's definitely not you. It's me. So, Broderick Jones, just the no-brainer, stud offensive lineman from Georgia, falls to the 14th pick in the draft, and they just drafted him. Like, duh.
And when Darnell Washington is in at tight end.
Ooh, yes, he's a great blocker. He's a big dude. He's taller than Jones.
I mean, you put those two guys on the same side of the line, you got something.
That's right. Yeah, I think that this is good. It's good for Najee. It's good for Pickett, man. Oh, Pickett. You know what Pickett? The thing is similar to what we talked about with Quentin Johnston. Like, close your eyes and just simulate NFL plays and where you think Quentin Johnston helps you. When I close my eyes and I simulate plays, all I see is Kenny Pickett like helping the Steelers sustain drives and score touchdowns. I see them like picking him up and like raising him and like putting him on the shoulders of offensive linemen and like running around celebrating him, like big comebacks in the division, beating the Ravens, beating the Browns because of Kenny Pickett heroics. It's something I can easily see when I close my eyes.
And if Trevor Lawrence, who I still think is limited, and I think Kenny Pickett is better than, if Trevor Lawrence can make a leap into the second season where he's plausible, as long as he's not playing the Chargers in the playoffs, then Pickett, I think, is better than Trevor Lawrence. And now you give him, he's got 3 good wide receivers. He's got 2 good tight ends. They're rebuilding the offensive line. I think Pickett's going to be okay.
He's going to be more than okay. Have you seen that he's taking snaps with the running backs? He's doing it with running back drills?
Whether it's this year or the next, Pickett's going to hit. He's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
He's not going to be up with the Mahomes, Allen, Burrow group, but he could comfortably get inside.
That's not who he is. He's a Jake Plummer style quarterback. And those guys have great fantasy value. Those guys are always going to have a year where they're top 10 because everything clicks with the completion percentage and the yards after the catch from the receivers and their rushing ability.
But I would be my number one, I would be a moth to a flame for fantasy purposes if I didn't take Anthony Richardson and just shove all the chips in.
Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, that's it. And in superflex leagues with the 101, you're going Richardson.
101
in
Dynasty?
rookie drafts.
Drafts. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, no, I know you're saying. Well, you say that like, oh yeah. But you have to understand.
I didn't know you were talking about redraft.
Leagues, Bijan is going at the 101, and it should be Richardson.
I said that because I wasn't sure if you were talking redraft or dynasty. But yeah. But then I know that Bijan is going number 1. I would, in a super flex, I would break that rule. I wouldn't try to get cute and draft Bijan to try to trade him. I would just go ahead and take Anthony Richardson.
You got to get Richardson. Yeah, I mean, You can always trade back with the 102 and see if the 102 wants to move up to 101. I would do that, but I would not risk it after that. At the 102, you're going Richardson. You got to get Richardson, man. So I love that you love Richardson. I love that you love Richardson.
He's the CJ Stroud is more polished and is fantastic. Anthony Richardson in a year, but maybe even in halfway into this year, could be like when Bo Jackson came up through the minor leagues in baseball and everybody's like, oh, he's so raw, he strikes out. Then he just gets up to the majors and just starts cranking like he's the best player in the big leagues. It wasn't even his primary sport. I think Anthony Richardson could be that good. He may be the best quarterback in fantasy when we're sitting here talking next year.
You could easily, like I've heard that next year Bijan's going to be the first running back, the RB1 drafted. Maybe not. Probably not, actually. I can also see Anthony Richardson being a clear top 5 guy. Like everyone's chasing Mahomes and these Konami code quarterbacks. Now, I happen to have Jalen Hurts as my QB1.
Me too.
Right. I mean, come on. Right. I mean, obviously. To me, it's obvious. But, I mean, other people, to me, he has the least risk. Again, I'm drafting him in a place where I want to minimize risk, and there's the least risk. He is super durable. He will level out the volatility week to week with his rushing, and he's got incredible weapons, and he is the quintessential, Brady-style leader of men in the NFL. So I love him on every level. And some of that translates to fantasy, by the way. So there's reasons to draft him for those reasons in fantasy. Anthony Richardson, you could see in that class where it's like, okay, Josh Allen was much riskier coming out of college, a much more volatile player, and had a much higher bust risk than Anthony Richardson. So I could see next year Anthony Richardson having an earlier ADP than Josh Allen. That's not the craziest thing. Josh Allen would take a step back this year and Anthony Richardson would be way better than expected.
I could see it, and it's not just, hey, he's so big and he's a runner, so this is great for fantasy. That's all true. But Anthony Richardson is a hell of a passer. He has got the best touch. Him and CJ Stroud have the best medium to deep ball accuracy of a quarterback since the Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow draft, which is a huge anomaly year for quarterbacks. So it's not just that Richardson's going to be such a great runner. He is actually a great passer, way better than given credit. I think he's going to start week 1 and go from there. I don't think there's going to be any holding him back. And I think he could be such an absolute force that he breaks all the rules of what we think about rookie quarterbacks. Hell, rookie quarterbacks are being QB1s their rookie season 3 of the last 4 years, if you count just Purdy's time when he was a starter, points per game.
Oh, come on. All right. Extrapolating Purdy. Get out of here.
Well, if anybody says rookie quarterbacks can't do it,
no, they can. No, they absolutely can. No, Cam Newton was a top 5 quarterback in his rookie year. And why, with Cam Newton being so clearly and easily, definitively the 101, like he was the 101 before they even started the pre-draft process. Everybody knew that the 101 is Cam Newton, and the conversation is who's coming after him. At least once we got through the process, Anthony Richardson should have been the 101, right?
Agreed.
So it was just mystifying to me that we're now in a place where the NFL has a better appreciation for the value that mobile quarterbacks bring to the table. And then Anthony Richardson is showing out at his pro day, showing out at the combine, proving that he is everything that you could want in a quarterback. He's giving you everything. There's no weaknesses. How is it that the scouts that are on the ground are not getting the message to the front office? Is it because the front offices are where we were years ago with analytics and that they're not listening to the scouts at all, that the NFL has actually overcorrected, and instead of allowing a scout to kind of sell Cam Newton and what he can do, they're so obsessed with, minimizing risk that they at the quarterback position that a heavier focus on analytics would actually lead you to Bryce Young as just the safest possible investment, where he's actually not that safe. The risk factor, just based on his size, is higher than any risk factor you can point to with Anthony Richardson. And so the argument should have been, in a rational world, of the stability and the low risk that CJ Stroud brings to the table versus the upside that you're getting with Richardson, and then the decision would have been Richardson at 101 and Stroud 102, but that's where the conversation should have been, and then a Young would fall into whoever the next, he would go to the Colts, right? And the Colts would have, begrudgingly drafted him, but he's just the best available, and they didn't trust Levis, and that's what it is. That would have been how I would have imagined things playing out in a rational world. But then you go to the draft, we were in Kansas City, and it's nothing like that. It's the opposite. It's the literal opposite, where it goes Young, Stroud, Richardson, and you feel like you're losing your mind, like you're crazy, and that someone is going to come up to you and grab you. Two people are going to come up to you and grab you, and they're going to haul you off to an asylum and be like, "Listen, man, like You're saying crazy things. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting people around you. Like, you can't operate in this society. We got to take you out of society. You're going nuts." And that's why I was like, felt like I was on the verge of that during the draft. I was like, how could a team push the button on Bryce Young at the 101 after such an incredible overpay? The only way you would do that is if you appreciated the game-changing, game-defining, franchise-defining abilities of Anthony Richardson. Only then would you be motivated to overpay that much to move up to the 101. And yet, no, they moved up for to double up on the condom, with the safest, least upside. I feel nothing with this pick selection.
Well, the owner's wife had a really good dinner, had a really good feeling. That's the NFL, in a sentence. You sat among the scouts at the Senior Bowl. I remember my awakening moment of being invited to the Senior Bowl for the first time and sitting among all of the scouts and thinking I was, man, I must have made it. I'm here. Look at me. I'm surrounded by all these people with credentials. And I'm watching, but I'm listening to the conversations around me of the little clusters of team scouts. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these really are the dumbest people that are walking the face of the earth. They're not serious about this. They're more engaged about where they're going to go drinking or what's the best barbecue to go to after they check the box of being at the Senior Bowl event, sitting in the stands. And being around scouts and then being around some executives and just listening to some of the coaches talk, it's like this. It's such a cesspool of ex-players who've never had a real job, that have they were stars high school football players, they were star college football players, they were whatever level of NFL or not. They go on to become coaches because they don't know, they haven't held any other type of job in their life, so they become scouts. They don't live for scouting. They don't live and die by it. They just echo what everybody else is saying. They give that up to the executives who say, well, everybody seems to agree with this, and people on TV seem to be saying this. So then all of a sudden Jerry Jones steps in. He watched something on YouTube and he usurps the pick that Will McClay was telling him to make. So all along the chain of command of these NFL teams, from the scouting on up, there's a lot of bizarre paths to making football decisions. And that's why you never see, it's not like you ever see a team kill it in the draft one year, then kill it in the draft, and like they got it down, like they figured out the cheat code. So they're going to have a great draft where we're all sitting there going, how do they do it? It's like, nope, one team got lucky this year, the next year they look like the complete idiots. And then somebody else got a lucky year and got a couple of good players out of it. So I don't know. I all I know is I don't trust what they say, whoever the theys are in it, from the analysts to the scouts and everybody in between. They don't know what they're talking about. I may not either, but I know they don't know what they're talking about. The proof is in the draft history.
Yeah, so they could make a great pick, right? Like Ekwonu was a great pick. Ike Ekwonu is a great player, right? He's the anchor of their offensive line. Okay. But just because they made a good pick at one point doesn't mean they know what they're doing, right? The one team that I can say most likely knows what they're doing based on just the preponderance of picks has to be the Colts. I mean, the Colts had such an incredible draft. It's not just Anthony Richardson. It was down the board.
Oh yeah, it was a great draft this year.
I mean, it was a masterpiece.
Yep.
Right, it was a symphony. It was Beethoven. It was Bach. It was that. I mean, Ballard. I mean, Beethoven, Bach, and Ballard. Right, that's what we're talking about. That's it, though. I mean, we're talking about one team that even has an idea what they're doing. That's basically what we're saying. And
then he has to be wary that Jim Irsay steps in, and then you could pick all the great players, and then you hire Frank Reich, and you're like, well, you just blew all your great draft by hiring a terrible coach.
And yeah, we get criticized all the time, right? You guys don't know what you're doing. You've got Anthony Richardson as your number one quarterback, and that, he wasn't even the second quarterback drafted, and blah, 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 blah. And you've got Stroud ahead of Young as well. Like, you're the only service that has, Bryce Young, outside the top 3 in superflex and 2 QB. And I'm like, good. It's called an advantage. You'll never get Bryce Young. I have no Bryce Young in any fantasy league. I was never going to get him. We're going to set you up so you never get Bryce Young and you never get Quentin Johnston. And we are the only service that has Roshan Johnson in the top 12, right? And Marvin Mims in the top 15. And that's okay. I'm cool with it, right? In Superflex, yeah, I'm absolutely cool with it. In Superflex drafts, we don't have Quentin Johnston among the top 12. And we are probably the only ones, other than you, that would put that out there and say, hey, we're going to stand by this. And it's not just me. It's Dario. It's Billy. It's Theo. And having you on and to be proof that we are not alone in the wilderness is just, it's been a great pleasure. Like Zach Charbonnet, right? Zach Charbonnet, I was not a fan of at any point. And the red flag of the transfer from Michigan to UCLA without like a clear explanation, like he wants to be closer to his family or he wants to follow the coach like Zach Evans, that's not a reason. That's not a reason like Jayden Reed, right? Where he wanted to go to a better school and he had to sit out a year because it was before the transfer portal started and then there was COVID. Like, okay, that all makes sense, right? That all is a reasonable, logical explanation from point A to point B. I need something that's not narrative based. And I never got that with Charbonnet. And now we see this interesting dynamic that's happening where Charbonnet's out indefinitely, but Kenneth Walker has a more definitive timeline where it's like he's going to be out a month. How are you reading the situation with this Seattle backfield?
My first thought on that situation is I don't want anything to do with it. I got 31 other sandboxes better to play in than that because I think Charbonnet's decent, and I think he's decent good. Kenneth Walker's decent good. They're both good. I don't know what Seattle's up to, taking Charbonnet up that high. I don't know how they're going to distribute the touches. I mean, if you want to guess, I mean, if you're a Kenneth Walker guy and you get it right, good for you. If you're a Charbonnet guy and you get it right, good for you.
You're not going to get it right if you're a
30.
Charbonnet guy, though.
Yeah.
You
Well,
talked about
Walker, let's say Walker
you
gets hurt.
talked about it earlier. You talked about it earlier, which is you're going to miss all this camp and you're going to miss the entire offense and it's going to be installed without you. That's something you can't come back from. So even if he is healthy by October, it's not going to matter, right? So that's the problem. Like Zach Charbonnet is starting his career off on a trajectory that leads most players to busting.
If he doesn't come back next week and take advantage of Walker being out, he's just going to keep sliding down my board.
He's got a dislocated shoulder.
Is it confirmed dislocated? I hadn't seen it. So I'm just operating on non-contact
He's out indefinitely.
Injury that I thought he was coming back this upcoming week.
It's very possible that he comes back this coming week and he has
But
a shoulder harness.
He's missing a huge opportunity. And you're right. If he's out for like 2, 3, 4 weeks, he's basically screwed his entire 2023.
Yeah, he's over. I think he's over before it began. I think that Kenneth Walker is better than you do. I think that Kenneth Walker is a complete dog, and I think that he is basically hurting himself by training too hard and being too intense, and I think that's just what happens. And just look at their headshots on Player Profiler. That's my favorite headshot comparison is Kenneth Walker versus Zach Charbonnet. And if you think that Zach Charbonnet has a chance, you're wrong. It's a similar dynamic that's going on in Detroit where Amon-Ra St. Brown is not going to allow, right? He's not going to allow Jameson Williams to be a thing. He won't. He's so competitive, right? And if you listen to Michael Irvin, if you heard Michael Irvin talk about whenever Alvin Harper would get targets, that he would be furious. One time he was chasing Alvin Harper down the field, yelling at him, saying, "That was my target. This is my touchdown. You're scoring my touchdown, motherfucker. You're scoring my touchdown, motherfucker. You're scoring. This is my touchdown, motherfucker." He was furious. Did not want Alvin Harper to be a thing. Chased Alvin Harper out of town. And Amon-Ra is going to chase Jameson Williams out of town. Jameson Williams does not have the mental toughness as he's already punching teammates. He does not have the mental toughness to withstand the son of the sun god, the shining, bright sun, the sunlight of the sun god is going to send him and eviscerate him right out of there. And I felt bad. The moment Charbonnet was drafted by Seattle, I felt really bad for him because I was like, well, this isn't going to happen. Right? We're talking about Kenneth Walker was one of the most prolific single-season rushers in college football history. But the thing with Kenneth Walker, I thought he was a comp to Nick Chubb, and I don't believe that's true. I think he's too small, and he's too fast. He's faster, smaller, and potentially not even as good a receiver. We're going to say I think Nick Chubb's going to catch more passes than Kenneth Walker this year. I think what Kenneth Walker is Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch dealt with multiple groin injuries, and Marshawn Lynch had a number of lower body injuries, and just when the lights came on Sunday, took absolutely zero prisoners. And I think that is what Kenneth Walker's all about, and I think we're going to be dealing with these soft tissue injuries with him, similar to what we dealt with Marshawn Lynch, and I just love they're both on Seattle. So that's my comp now for, I think, and forever for Kenneth Walker is going to be Marshawn Lynch, though he is a top 5 runner in the league. Just not quite Nick Chubb. Come on.
Yeah. My scenario for those two is I am perplexed of why they brought in Charbonnet. I respect Walker, but for the price that you have to pay for Walker from last year's draft class alone, I'd much rather have White, Pacheco, Pierce over the Walker situation. I think Walker's a talent with the rest of them. I just don't like the situation for the price that I have to pay.
Have you heard have you seen it? The new hype around Rachaad White, that the coaches came out and called him a superstar?
Yeah, I
hated it. I hated
lamenting
it so much.
that. Yeah.
It made me so mad. It was like, it's a victory lap, Podfather, victory lap. I'm like, first of all, we don't victory lap on just sunshiny coach speak, okay? Fluffy coach speak does not get a victory lap, though it does confirm my priors, which I love, and I'm happy to do it. But it just makes he's going to make his ADP pop a round, which is, hurts his value in fantasy drafts, where this was a guy we were drafting in every draft. Like, you must draft this player, right? We talked earlier about your best value late round quarterbacks. My 2 best value late round quarterbacks, I did a video. You can look for it on YouTube. Anthony Richardson and Kenny Pickett. And in terms of must draft players, period, one of my top 4 must draft players was Rashod White. Like, you can't leave your draft without him. Now it's becoming a little bit harder. And one of the stayaways, one of the ultimate traps, has to be Breece Hall. You think Breece Hall is a trap player, or the trap player of all?
Definitely, because he's either as good, but I think he's not as good as Rashod White and Isiah Pacheco. So already right there, I've got 2 guys like you're talking about that are available in the middle rounds, where I'm going to pay a first round price or close to it for Breece Hall, with all the pressure he's got from the Jets depth chart coming off an ACL, and Cook wandering around the practice field because Aaron Rodgers cleared money and he wants to collect toys around him that he likes. I mean, no disrespect to Breece Hall, but for the price tag you got on him, I'll take Pacheco, Pierce, and Rashod White over all of them. And I just think they're more talented. It's not even a value proposition.
You'll even get a better
White
value on
better
Walker
than
now,
Breece
though.
Hall.
No, with the Walker injury, a week from now, you can put Walker in that mix.
Walker could start getting into conversations as his ADP drops, but to me, Rashod White's better than all of them when they're all in their best circumstances, and that means for the price, Rashod White, I start my draft planning with, where am I drafting Rashod White? So I know I got one running back. Now what am I going to do with all my other picks?
Yeah, you could have a running back group led by Rashod White and Isiah Pacheco and Kenneth Gainwell,
which frees you up from taking a running back in the first round. If you feel pressure, like, oh, I got to look at all these names in the first round. Nope. I know who my backfield's sitting in the 4th and 5th round.
You know what's so weird to me is every year, I was talking to Bradley Stalder, and I mentioned in the podcast monologue that, conversation with him was inspirational, just thinking about strategy. And he was talking about zero RB and how some of the best ball drafters are going zero RB, and I'm going more zero RB this year than I ever have, and certainly in the Scott Fish Bowl I went hard zero RB, and I honestly think I should have gone more zero RB. I probably could have gone even floating closer to the sun, actually. And the question that doesn't get asked, because everyone's so player agnostic, they're like, it's not about the players. It's not about the players with your strategy. It's about team building and, ADP trends. Right? And so it's like, no, actually, for me, a question that needs to be asked before you go zero RB, do you like the running backs that are available in the middle and late rounds? Who are they? It's like that doesn't get asked. It's like, I don't know, what is the average ADP of the wide receiver versus the average ADP of the running back, and that's going to help me determine whether I go zero RB or not. And I'm like, okay, fine. First of all, the average ADPs for running backs are down, and the average ADPs for wide receivers are up, meaning the receivers are getting drafted earlier and earlier. And so if you want to get the elite ones, you got to pay a price. There's no choice. There's no way to get elite running backs. There's no way to get elite receivers as late as you can get elite running backs. That's just not possible. And so sometimes you can zig when the rest of your league mates are zagging, and that's a good move. And there are times when that makes some sense. Like, I'm thinking about maybe tight end premium leagues, and if everyone is rushing to overdraft tight ends in a tight end premium league, yeah, I could see using that as an opportunity to zig when your league mates are zagging. That makes some sense to me. not when it comes to the fundamental building block of a team like a wide receiver. You got to just pay the market rates. And then the market rates of wide receiver help you to determine when you're going to draft the other positions. That's sort of a fundamental approach to strategizing for a fantasy draft. Right there. It's the best way I can encapsulate it. And then another question about how late you want to push running back has to be the thing no one ever fucking asks, which is who's available later? If a couple of years ago, the running backs that were available late were not inspiring at all. I did not see a lot of value there. And so my desire to go zero RB was not as prevalent, right? I'm like, I don't like Ronald Jones, like gross, right? So I'm like, I don't like these running backs. Mike Davis, this is terrifying. I'm going to go with a running back a little earlier here, okay? This year, it's like I'm in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's crazy. Everywhere I look, there's something delicious. Right? There's an Isiah Pacheco over there, and there's a Kenneth Walker soon enough, right? And there's a Rashod White. There was a Joe Mixon for many months. Joe Mixon was in that area. There's so many of these guys available. And then you go later, and you can get a Gainwell and some of these super attractive handcuffs that are available this year. It's like, oh my God, this is the best possible year to go zero RB, not based on anything other than the actual running backs that are available in actual rounds. It's just like the thing no one ever wants to talk about.
When you start out identifying like the White Pacheco, or when Mixon was in there, there's such value 4, 5, and 6. And that's where I spend most of my start there. I start building it there. Then I go back up into the early rounds to see how I want to complement them. Most people spend 90% of their draft time trying to decide what's the secret pick between McCaffrey and Eckler. Like who am I going to take? Like, dude, they're both freaking great. If you're going to pick one, just pick one. You don't have to spend 90 hours and put a flow diagram chart together on all these great running backs. Just pick one. I'm worried about rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'll go back up and say, okay, I'll get all my values there. Now what do I need? What does this open me up to do in the first round? What does this open me up to do in the second round?
Yeah. Jamar Chase, that's what it lets you do. It lets you do Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Right? Lets you do whatever you want. Right?
Yeah,
Chris
you want
Olave.
to take a Kelsey? Yeah, you want to take a Kelsey? You want to take you're free to do that when your backfield's already made. You know it's coming in 4 rounds.
Kelsey, that's another one. Oh man, that's right. Oh God. So yes, zero RB is a smash this year. But looking at those double-digit rounds at the handcuffs, I mentioned Gainwell. Give us a couple more that you like.
Besides the obvious, I mean, if you look at the offenses that are built around Eckler, McCaffrey, then a Joshua Kelly, Elijah Mitchell, if you're trying to shore them up.
Joshua Kelly.
If we're looking for like talent that it falls in their lap, like Tyjae Spears, if something happens with Derrick Henry and it falls in the lap of Tyjae Spears, then I would be pretty excited. If you're looking for guys that
Tyjae Spears, top 5 in yards created per touch in college last year. He was creating a lot of yards. He was right there with McCaffrey. Sorry, he was right there with McBride. It was McBride. It was Spears. It was Bijan. It was Roschon.
And if his knee turns to dust 3 years from now, I don't care. I'm playing for him right now. Whether I'm going to use him or trade him if he gets hot, whatever I'm going to do with him. A couple guys I could see overtaking or really cutting into the starter, and they probably won't overtake him, but they could really cut into him and make a niche market, but also be sitting there if the starter gets hurt. I think Jalen Warren's better than Najee Harris. I think Mike Tomlin knows that too, but he can't pull the trigger. He almost pulled the trigger on it last year, and then Warren sprained his ankle. And I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm not betting a lot on it. It wouldn't cost you a lot. To me, D'Ernest Johnson's better than Travis Etienne as far as a talent goes in the year 2023. I would be with D'Ernest Johnson. Now, he's not going to bump Travis Etienne, but they're looking for something to go with Travis Etienne.
I know. He's not going to bump Tank Bigsby either, though.
I'm not a big Tank Bigsby guy.
I know, but come on with D'Ernest Johnson.
For the price, I can take the look.
I know, but I think Joshua Kelly was as deep as well. No, I'll give you one more guy that's even deeper than Joshua Kelly, but not as deep as fucking D'Ernest Johnson. Come on now. How about Rico Dowdle?
Not crazy because I don't.
Rico Dowdle. There's no one else there. There's no guarantee they signed Zeke, and let me see if Davis runs a 4.7.
Hunter Lukey.
Rico Dowdle. They've come out and said Rico Dowdle's our guy behind. There was all this talk of Malik Davis. A bunch of underdog drafters selected Malik Davis late, and it's like, what are you doing? That's not even a sure thing. He's not good at all.
Yeah, we won't argue.
Rico actually has some juice.
You know it's going to be Ezekiel Elliott, so let's move on to the next question.
I think it's probably going to be Zeke, but it's I think Rico's as fringy as we could possibly go. You didn't mention Chuba Hubbard.
Don't like him.
You don't like Chuba Hubbard, but he's developed as a pass catcher. Doesn't that say something to you?
I don't know. That Blackshear's getting a lot of the pass catching attention in practice, but I don't really care. I don't really want anything tied to the Panthers if I can help it.
That's a great point. How about what about a better offense? What about Jerome Ford?
I really like Jerome Ford.
Oh, there we go. I was hoping you would say that. That's it. Isn't he it?
Well,
isn't it? Because there's no one behind him. It's all green grass after him.
What's going to be funny is if something happens to Nick Chubb like week 4, like he sprains his ankle, he's going to be out for 3 weeks. The frenzy for Jerome Ford, the frenzy for Jerome Ford that week is going to be insane.
It's going to be nuts. Like he's going to be the chalkiest chalk player on DraftKings. It's going to be insane. It's going to be that's it. That's it. Jerome Ford is I think where we are aligning with our Venn diagram of top running back handcuffs. Not Rico Dowdle yet. Not D'Ernest Johnson ever. Let's bring to the people the thing we promised 3 hours ago, which was to reevaluate these sophomore wide receivers. I'm just now going to go super rapid fire. And by super rapid fire, as we know, that means not quite rapid fire and not rapid fire at all, really. But I'm going to try my best. I'm just going to throw names at you, dichotomies. You just pick one. Okay?
Yep.
Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson?
Not in love with either. Like them both. I'd probably lean Garrett Wilson, even though I know Olave is a better wide receiver. But I think Wilson's in a better spot for value to flip potentially. And Olave is getting a little too crowded for me to pay that price of. But I could, compared to Garrett Wilson.
It is Derek Carr, and it is the NFC South.
I think Rashid Shaheed is potentially better than anybody on the Saints wide receiver depth chart. And I love A.T. Perry, and I like Chris Olave. And Michael Thomas being alive just scares me, but he can't be around that much longer. But I could see Garrett Wilson being a Raider in an exchange for Devontae Adams. So depending on the day, they could get a different answer from me. But I like those guys. I don't love either one of them for the price.
We talked about Shaheed and how I have, in a previous show, come to a reckoning on him that I missed it because he didn't test. I didn't know how fast he was. Okay. And so if you actually look at what he did, 700 yards in his final year in only 11 games, right? He's one of those players where because he had the injury, because he had the COVID year, you have to go back to his freshman year where he was productive. He had 1,200 plus scrimmage yards, all-purpose yards at Weber State as a true freshman. The guy can play football. And he's super fast We just had no idea how fast he was because he didn't test at all. Right? So that's, a hole in my evaluation of the last couple of years has been Rashid Shaheed, and I'm ashamed.
NCAA record holder, I believe, for most kickoff return touchdowns in a career.
He's a great football player, and I'm sorry that I didn't see it earlier. I'm sorry, but you're right. There actually is it's pretty crowded down there in New Orleans. It's more crowded than Chris Olave advocates want to believe. I also question whether Garrett Wilson's in the great spot that you say he's in, because I don't want to be in an Aaron Rodgers molasses offense. I don't think that is actually good. He was in a prolific offense where they were throwing the ball 50 times when it wasn't Zach Wilson, when it was Flacco, when it was Mike White. They were playing from behind. They had 50 pass attempts a game, and there's no way that Wilson's going to see that kind of pass volume this year. He's brought in a bunch of Aaron Rodgers blankies from Cobb to Lazard. So I lean Olave, but I agree with you. Both of them have problems, and I just like Olave at cost better because you can get him in the third round as opposed to the second round. That I agree with. So that's why I'm more likely to go Olave. But they're both getting hype, and they're both getting steamed up, and they're both, you need to proceed with caution. They were both outproduced by Jackson Smith and Jigba in 2021. Calvin Austin or Tyquon Thornton?
Don't care. I thought Calvin Austin would be better, but Tyquon Thornton is at least starting, or is pretending to be starting.
And had some weeks. Had some explosive plays.
Had a moment and then sucked out loud after them. So I'm not into either one of them. Steelers keep showing that they hate Calvin Austin, so I'm not going to love them if they're going to keep hating him.
I like Calvin Austin. I think that
I do too.
The Steelers don't respect rookies unless they're first-round picks, and so that's their culture. That's been their culture. I think that he fits a very specific need. I think that's the type of player that the Lions should have targeted instead of Jameson Williams, and I think that Calvin Austin and Tyquon Thornton are both going to outproduce Jameson Williams this season. Here's one. And I have a feeling I know where you're going to go, and I'm so excited. So I want to put this out there. Skyy Moore or Jahan Dotson?
Not even close. Skyy Moore.
Skyy Moore, baby. He can't get higher. I've seen him going fourth round now. Do you see how high he's going now?
Really?
People are finally like, oh, wait, he's a starter with Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a good thing.
It took Tony going out to do that. I mean, come on. He was already going to be the guy before, with or without Tony.
I thought it was going to be Tony. Wait, I need the right glasses for this. Where's the right? Oh, here we go. I thought the starter was going to be Kadarius Toney. I drafted a bunch of Kadarius Toney thinking he was a starter. I looked at the depth chart and I saw Kadarius Toney. So I drafted a bunch of Kadarius Toney. I didn't even think about Skyy Moore until then I learned, Kadarius Toney's going back in for another knee procedure, only his 7th in 3 years.
So the choice is I can either have the top wide receiver with the best passing quarterback in the NFL, or I can have the third best wide receiver on his own team with a bottom 5 week 1 starting quarterback. Those are my options. I think I'll take the top target wide receiver with the best quarterback in Skyy Moore.
It's too easy. Yeah, at this point, it's becoming clear that Skyy Moore is going to be a thing, but you had months to get him, which was great. Treylon Burks or George Pickens?
George Pickens.
By a mile. Treylon Burks is a bust. George Pickens is about to erupt.
Yeah, George Pickens is fantastic. I am worried he's going to get the Claypool route tree and be stuck on the outside too much and just get those garbage lofting passes down the sidelines that he can catch. But I want him to he could be a wide receiver 1 in a blink. He could be one of the top guys in the league right now, but they don't seem to use him that way. I'm hoping that they do this year.
Well, Claypool's gone, and I think they are going to be using more Austin outside to stretch the field, and that will help Pickens. Drake London, or Christian Watson?
I'm okay with either of these guys talent-wise. I hate their situations, so
Despise that's a great point there.
yeah,
Despise the situations.
either
One
one
guy
you
was
want.
unlucky last year in that he was in such a low volume offense and commanded a huge share. One guy in Christian Watson was really lucky last year. He was the luckiest receiver in the league, and I never liked drafting the luckiest receiver from the previous year.
And he's getting ready to go into a similar offense that London was stuck in last year, so I won't blame or scream at anybody for whichever their preference of those two are.
Just say Drake London. Just say London.
Sure.
London, right? London. More likely to be a bust, London or Pitts?
I don't think either will be a bust, but the way that Pitts is going, as long as Arthur Smith is the coach, Pitts is going to be a bust.
Boom. John Mechie or Jameson Williams?
Have to take Mechie.
Yes!
Jameson Williams is a talent, but he's either going to be in prison or suspended, and I'm not just talking about from this 6 weeks for gambling. I mean, that guy
he's already punched a teammate.
He's making Kadarius Toney look like a genius.
Right. It's not going to happen. We have all these players drafted in the first round, especially receivers. There's a long history of receivers drafted in the first round that just have decided at some point that they don't want to take football seriously, and they're more interested in drag racing or punching people or whatever it is.
Imagine if Toney or Jameson Williams really got their head screwed on straight years ago. I mean, they can't. It's going to be hard for them to just throw a switch now, but super talented. But I don't know that Jameson Williams is going to be in the league in 2 years.
Right. This is Henry Ruggs 2.0. And they all have like these Alabama track records too. That's the craziest thing about where these guys come from. And Nick Saban, he's such a disciplinarian, right? And he's always focused on the right details, and he's a character first guy. And it's like,
he's a genius. Let me bench Jalen Hurts.
You got him. But that's why I want to throw Mechie in there. Because Jameson Williams, once upon a time, was on Alabama, right? And then that's where he actually did well, and he had to run and hide from the situation that he had at Ohio State, because he's like, listen, I can't. You guys can't expect me, right? I mean, what do you think I'm going to do here, right? You think I can't put up more than 200 yards. Competing for targets with Olave and Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I got to get out of here. I got to go to the place that made Henry Ruggs. That's the thing, right? And so, hello, Nick Saban. And then, sure enough, he's nothing. Yep, big nothing. John Mechie, though, not that prototype at all.
Professional wide receiver.
A professional, real wide receiver who has the clear number one job. Woods is dust. Nico Collins never going to happen. He's a bust. It's so clearly going to be Mechie. His ADP, an underdog, like around 19 for a while. It's going up, but it can't go up high enough at this point. It'll be a great value for the rest of August. I've one more here. Two more comparisons. Alec Pierce or Wan'Dale Robinson?
Alex Pierce. I really like Alex Pierce's game, and I think it works perfect with Anthony Richardson. And Wan'Dale Robinson is one of 19 wide receivers the Giants got this offseason.
I have acquired some extra Alec Pierce lately because smart people like him, and I came to Jesus on him. I was not bullish on him earlier, but I've become more bullish, warming to him, especially now without Paris Campbell. I think it makes sense. David Bell or Jalen Tolbert?
I don't want to play. I'll take Dennis Houston, but if you're going to make me pick, I'll probably take David Bell. Just to hope that he's somehow an Amon-Ra St. Brown in hiding.
Give me your top three rookie tight ends.
Kincaid way at the top, generational. Then Laporta's fine. He's good. Then Musgrave. And I would take Musgrave over Laporta if it wasn't for landing spot. But landing spot, I'll put Laporta over Musgrave. But I like Musgrave. But Kincaid's way over them.
Kincaid is awesome. I get it.
And I know you would never say Michael Mayer is in this group. So,
well, I understand that most likely, we don't have the testing numbers in front of us, but most likely Dalton Kincaid is an upper percentile athlete. Do you believe that to be true?
yes.
And athleticism matters most for tight ends at any other position.
And he gets open.
Michael Mayer, that was one of, if not the best college tight ends ever. That makes it tough for me to not appreciate him. Why don't you like him more? This is freaking me out.
I hate him. He's not a good receiver. He's a clunky in movement, clunky route runner. If I wanted to take Michael Mayer, just go get Kate Otten.
How did he command 100 targets a season at Notre Dame if he's not smooth?
You got me. All I know is the more as soon as I looked at him, I'm like, this can't be the top tight end. And then he doesn't even. I don't want to use the NFL as now all of a sudden they're geniuses after we bashed them, but even they turned on him. Like the Raiders saved him from falling out of oblivion in the draft when he was supposed to be the next Gronk. He was going to be a top 10 pick, and he was the best. He was a generational tight end and baby Gronk and all that. And then, hell, did Schoonmaker go ahead of him? I mean,
no, he was the fourth pick in the second round. No, he was drafted right. He and Laporta were back to back.
He is a clumsy, clunky, typical wide receiver or typical tight end, where there's now all of these high-level athletes coming into the league. I'll take Jelani Woods over Mayer. I have no interest in Mr. Mayer.
But, okay, so Mr. Mayer's best comparable player on Player Profiler is Zach Ertz. You would agree with that?
No, Zach Ertz is better.
But you understand why he's comparable to Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
Like that's not like a surprise.
No, that's not crazy. As the Ertz has had and has way better hands.
Ertz had a similar season that what he had at Stanford in his final year. Ertz had 900 yards, 898 yards exactly. Had the 100 targets, the incredible target share, catch rate, everything. And then he came out early. But Mayer did that for 2 consecutive seasons. And if you look at his career numbers, I mean, I think you would say that Zach Ertz has been a successful NFL tight end. He had a season with 750 yards, 900, 1100, 800, 800, 800. And in those seasons, he had 8 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. If that's what I get from the probability that Michael Mayer gives you a Zach Ertz type outcome, given what he did in college and given where he was drafted, the probability is very high.
My comp is Komet.
Well, that's not a good comp because Komet's bigger and more athletic, but wasn't as productive. The tight ends that are athletic, a Laporta, a Kincaid, and a Musgrave, one of them is going to be able to make a run at being Jimmy Graham of this class. I'm not going to say Gronk. I'm not going to say Kelsey because that's unfair. But one of those 3 guys, and I believe it's Musgrave because he's got the best size-adjusted athleticism, could be and will be that guy. So, no, Mayer doesn't have that ceiling. But the probability that any of these guys has a Zach Ertz level career is actually highest for Mayer, even though his ceiling is capped, unlike the other three. That's the nuance that I'm bringing to the table here, where I believe that you're wrong and that this Mayer dismissal is unfounded. If anyone can be dismissed, it's Kincaid, because he doesn't have the athletic testing that we can fall back on. All he has is a very similar season at Utah to what I saw from Michael Mayer at Notre Dame.
When I watch those two guys on tape, they're not even in the same universe.
Kincaid is incredibly smooth, and that's why he was drafted before Mayer. I agree with you. I mean, in the year before, Kincaid had like a 78% catch rate. Kincaid's really good. He is.
Really good. Really, really good. And landed in a good spot.
I understand he landed in a good spot. He's going to get outproduced by Dawson Knox in year one because he's a rookie. He's a rookie tight end. This is what happens.
But it's like
right?
Kyle Pitts. We all got all excited about Kyle Pitts, but he obviously landed wrong. Kyle Pitts is not a bad player. He's in a bad situation.
The guy that landed the most right was actually Mayer, because Devontae Adams is not going to be in Las Vegas more than one more year. And then it's going to be the Michael Mayer and Jacoby Myers show with a pocket passer, most likely. That's what you actually want. I think that you need to go back and rewatch. If there's one guy we've talked about that we disagree on, I think fervently, it's got to be Mayer. I think you got to go back and rewatch and remember that these Zach Ertz outcomes are very good. This is top 5 tight end outcomes we're talking about. You don't need to hit on a Travis Kelce. And in fact, if that's your goal, especially in tight end premium or 2 tight end leagues in Dynasty, I think that could lead you down the wrong path of just taking too many swings on too many guys with great size-adjusted athleticism. And you'll end up with just too many Darnell Washingtons. That's my fear of evaluating tight ends on athleticism alone and sort of, smoothness as route runners, where you're going to end up with either a bunch of size speed specimens and a bunch of sort of move tight ends, and the guys that are 250 pounds that are just great at football fall through the cracks.
And I like the new era guys, and we're going to get another wave of them coming up with the next tight end class. These tight ends coming into college now are becoming so much more proficient receivers, so much better route runners. I think we are going to get a lot of good athleticism numbers, plus they know how to be a receiver. I mean, Shoemaker's got great athleticism numbers. I don't know that he's a very good receiver as a tight end. But like Musgrave has it all. I mean, I think he's the second best of this group if he went to a better landing spot.
I have the most Musgrave for the same reasons I have the most Michael Wilson.
Yeah, it's a perfect pick in that range. You could argue Musgrave at his price over Laporta at his price.
Yeah, and Musgrave has the athletic profile and the size to be the next sort of tight end one, a future tight end one. I don't see that for Mayer, but I see a bunch of top 5 seasons. And with Kincaid, I'm still dubious, and I want to see more. I don't evaluate tight ends just based on their route running the way you do. So that's where I might have a blind spot with Kincaid. You might have a blind spot with Mayer, and we both like Musgrave. I think that's where we've come down here with the tight ends. Give me your truther player. Give me the guy that you're not dropping under any circumstances.
Oh, not dropping.
Just a guy that, he's stashed. My guys would be, Julius Chestnut. I'm a truther of Julius Chestnut. Yep. I'm a truther of like Ashton Doolin.
Gotcha.
Justice Hill.
Kene Nwangu, I think, is going to be the number 2 back for Minnesota and have sudden value.
I love it. You love him
And
as
I
a
like,
runner,
and,
too.
and
Not
I
just
like
a special
that guy.
teamer.
No, I
He's
thought
got
he was better than Dave.
He's got size, dude. He's 210 pounds.
And athleticism. I thought he was better than David Montgomery. When I couldn't believe what Iowa State was doing when they had those two guys. It was like Roshan and Bijan all over again.
I've seen that, and Wongyu's running with the twos.
Yep.
He's running with the twos. What more do you people want? He's running with the twos. But yet, because he has been, he has that scarlet letter, that S on his chest. And you know what that is, right? The S on his chest, special teams. That's the problem. That's why no one wants. That's why people are drafting Chandler. They're drafting McBride. I'm doing that. I'm guilty. But that's because you and I both know that Madison's nothing.
Yep.
Right? So you could take shots on all four of them. Not Madison, but Chandler, McBride, Nwangu, and then literally anyone else they pick up.
Yeah.
And you just take a shot.
And Nwangu's not only got the size and the athleticism that you can see on paper on his numbers, that guy is like, pulling it back to the Amon-Ra St. Brown comparison. That guy is a team captain, high quality, hard worker. That's why he's the number 2 over those guys right now. So, I mean, he's got more, I think, and have thought he's got more in the tank if somebody would let it loose. So hopefully this year he'll get a shot for the cost.
I'm going to pick him up in the Scott Fish Bowl right now. In terms of deep running backs that people in even the deepest dynasty leagues can pick up right now, actionable information. From me, the suggestion is Rico Dowdle, and from you, the suggestion is Kene Nwangu. Give us a bold prediction.
Isiah Pacheco will be a top 10 fantasy points per game scorer, and it will be led by his surprising amount of catch count that we talked about earlier.
I love it. So, okay, I'm in the Scott Fish Bowl right now. Okay. Who should I drop to pick up Kene Nwangu? Should I drop Justice Hill, Keontae Ingram, or Joshua Kelly?
Definitely not Joshua Kelly. I would probably say Justice Hill, just because they've mistreated him for 100 years, and Keaton Mitchell's probably better than him. So I don't know what Justice Hill's future lies, but it never seems to be anything good. So
okay, we're putting
Kelly's a heartbeat away from being an RB1. You want to talk about guys that everybody would rush to go get in season in redraft? Well, if Eckler goes down, there'll be a Josh Kelly frenzy.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.